The bus wasn't supposed to stop there. I remember that clearly because I was awake when it happened. The road had been empty for hours, just a long stretch of black cutting through fields I couldn't see, only feel. The kind of darkness that presses against the window like it wants to come inside. Everyone else on the bus was asleep, heads tilted, mouths slightly open. Even the driver hadn't spoken in a while. And then the brakes hissed. Not suddenly, not hard, just a slow, tired sigh like the bus had decided on its own to stop breathing. I looked up. There was no station, no lights, no sign. Just a narrow road, and a small wooden board standing crooked in the dirt. The driver didn't announce anything. He didn't even turn his head. But the door opened. That soft, mechanical wheeze echoed through the bus, louder than it should have been. I waited for someone else to react. No one did. A few people shifted in their seats, but their eyes stayed closed. One man near the front let out a slow snore. It felt wrong, like the moment should have meant something more, but it didn't. Then the driver spoke. Last stop. His voice was low, flat, like he had said it too many times. I frowned. That didn't make sense. My ticket was for another city, 2 more hours at least. I even checked it again just to be sure. The ink looked faded, older than it should have been, but the name was still there. So why were we stopping? I looked out the window again. That wooden sign, I could see it better now. It had a name carved into it, but I couldn't read it. Not because it was too dark, because the letters didn't stay still. They looked scratched in, deep, uneven, like someone had carved them in a hurry. But every time I tried to focus, the shape of the words seemed to shift slightly, like my eyes were refusing to agree on what they were seeing. I blinked hard. The letters blurred, then snapped back into something almost readable. Almost. Are we here? The voice came from behind me. I turned. A woman maybe in her 40s sat 2 rows back. Her face looked pale but calm, too calm. I don't think so, I said. This isn't my stop. She didn't answer right away. Just stared past me, toward the open door. Then she smiled. Not a big smile, not warm. Just acceptance. It is, she said quietly. That was the first moment I felt it. Not fear. Just a small shift inside my chest, like something had moved slightly out of place. I stood up. The bus felt colder now, or maybe I just noticed it for the first time. As I stepped into the aisle, I glanced at the other passengers again. Still asleep. Every single one of them. Except the woman behind me. And now the driver. He was watching me through the mirror above his seat. Waiting. I hesitated. Something told me to sit back down, to ignore it, to let the bus move again. But it didn't. The engine was still running, low and steady, but we weren't going anywhere. The door stayed open, like it was expecting me. I took a step forward, then another. Each one felt heavier than it should. When I reached the front, I paused beside the driver. Up close, something felt off. His hands were on the wheel, but they weren't moving, not even slightly, too still, like they weren't really hands at all. I swallowed. Is this a scheduled stop? I asked. He didn't look at me. Everyone gets off here eventually. The words landed slowly. Not like an answer, more like a fact. I waited for him to say something else. He didn't. So I stepped down. The air outside was colder than I expected. It wrapped around me instantly, thin, dry, and quiet. Too quiet. The moment my foot touched the ground, the bus door closed behind me. I turned quickly. Wait. But it was already pulling away. No warning. No sound except the low engine hum fading into the dark. I watched the red taillights shrink, then disappear completely. And just like that, I was alone. I stood there for a while, trying to understand what had just happened. Then I looked around. The road stretched in both directions, empty, no streetlights, no houses in sight. Just that wooden sign a few steps ahead. I walked toward it slowly. Each step made a soft crunch on the gravel, the only sound in the world. When I reached the sign, I leaned closer. The letters were still there, still shifting, but now I could almost make them out. Not clearly, just enough to feel something tight in my chest again. It looked like a name, a town name, but not one I had ever heard before. And I travel a lot. I know most of the small towns on this route. This one, it wasn't on any map I knew. I pulled out my phone. No signal, not even a flicker. I tried anyway, opened the map, zoomed out. Nothing, just a blank stretch of road, like the place didn't exist. That's when I heard it, a faint sound behind me. Not loud, just distant, like something moving. I turned. At first I saw nothing, just darkness, then a shape, far down the road. A figure, standing still, watching. I couldn't make out any details, no face, no movement. Just the outline of someone or something standing there. Too far to call out, too still to ignore. I felt that shift again, stronger this time, fear starting to take shape. I looked back at the sign, then at the road ahead. There was only one direction that made sense, forward. So I started walking. The gravel turned into dirt after a while, then into something smoother, like an old road that hadn't been used in years. And slowly, shapes began to appear. Houses, small, quiet, dark. Windows like empty eyes. No lights inside. No cars parked outside. Just stillness. But it wasn't abandoned. I could feel that. There was something here. Something awake. As I walked deeper into the town, I noticed something strange. The doors, some of them were slightly open, just enough to create thin black gaps, like someone had left in a hurry, or was about to return. I stopped in the middle of the road, listened. Nothing. No wind. No insects. No distant sounds of life. Just my own breathing. Too loud. I forced myself to keep moving, one step at a time, trying not to look too closely at the houses. But my eyes kept drifting. To the windows. To the doors. To the spaces in between. And then I saw it. A photograph, pinned to a wooden post near the road. I almost walked past it, but something pulled me back. I stepped closer. The photo was old, edges curled, slightly faded. It showed a girl, maybe 16. Dark hair, soft eyes. She was smiling, but the smile felt wrong. Too still, like it had been held too long. Underneath the photo, there was a name, or at least part of one. The ink had smudged, or maybe it had faded over time. I leaned in, tried to read it. M. That's all I could make out. Just 2 letters. M. I frowned. Why did that feel familiar? I stepped back slowly, and that's when I noticed something else. There were more photos, not just one, dozens, pinned along the road, on walls, on posts, on doors, all of them showing different faces, different people, all smiling the same way. all with names that looked incomplete, fading, or being erased. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I turned in a slow circle. The town felt different now. Not empty, not quiet, just watching, like it had been waiting for me to notice. And somewhere deep in my mind, a thought started to form. Soft, unclear, but persistent. I didn't come here by accident. I looked back toward the road where I had entered. The darkness there felt thicker now, heavier, like it had closed behind me. And for a moment, I couldn't remember what city I was supposed to go to. I tried. I really did. But the name slipped away, like it had never been there. I stood there in the middle of that silent town, surrounded by faces that were slowly disappearing, and felt something worse than fear. Something quieter, something colder. The feeling that maybe I had already been here before. I showed the photo to the first person I saw, and he looked at me like I was holding something that didn't exist. I didn't even notice him at first. He was standing near one of the houses, half in shadow, like he had always been there and I had just failed to see him. An older man, thin, wearing a long coat that hung loose on his frame. His face looked tired, but not in a normal way, more like worn down by something that didn't let him rest. I walked toward him slowly, the photo still in my hand. For a second, I felt relief. Finally, someone alive. "Excuse me," I said, holding up the picture. "Do you know this girl?" He didn't answer. His eyes moved from my face down to the photo, and then back again. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to feel wrong. "I found this," I added, trying to keep my voice steady. "There are more of them all over the town." Still nothing. Then he shook his head. Just once. Slow. No. The answer came too quickly after that pause. Too clean. I frowned. "You're sure?" He didn't even look at the photo again. I would remember. But something about the way he said it made my grip tighten, because it didn't sound like confidence. It sounded like a rule. I glanced back at the road behind me, at the rows of photos pinned to wood and walls. "There are dozens of them," I said. "Different people, same kind of pictures. Some of the names are fading like this one." I looked down at the photo again. The letters felt weaker now. "M," I whispered. I was sure there had been more. I looked back up at the man. "Emily," I said. The name slipped out naturally. Too naturally. For a moment, I felt certain that was it. Emily. But the second I said it, something changed. The man's face didn't react. Not confusion. Not recognition. Nothing. Just that same tired stillness. "There's no one here by that name," he said. I stared at him. "That's not possible." He blinked once. Slow. "People come and go," he said, "but we remember who belongs." That word again. Belongs. I felt that quiet pressure in my chest return. Stronger this time. "Then why are these here?" I asked, gesturing around us. "Why are there photos of people no one remembers?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted past me, toward the deeper part of town, like he was checking something. Or someone. Then he leaned a little closer. His voice dropped. "You shouldn't be asking about them." The words weren't aggressive. They were careful, like a warning that didn't want to sound like one. "Why not?" Another pause. Then he straightened again. "You're not from here," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I replied. "I just got off the bus." Something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise. Something else. Recognition. But it faded quickly. The bus, he repeated quietly. I nodded. Yeah, it stopped outside. There was no station. I thought maybe. It doesn't stop, he said. His voice cut through mine. Flat. Certain. I blinked. What? The bus doesn't stop here. A chill moved through me. It did, I said. I was on it. I got off. You're talking to me. He didn't argue. He just watched me. Like he was waiting for me to realize something on my own. Then he said, "You're mistaken." I almost laughed, but it didn't come out. Look, I said, trying to stay calm. I don't know what's going on in this place, but something is wrong. These photos, the names fading, people acting like they're not real. I froze. The words hung between us. What? The people in those photos, he said, they're not real. I stared at him. They have faces, I said. Names, someone put them there. They appear, he replied. Appear. He nodded slowly. Sometimes overnight, sometimes during the day. No one sees who puts them up. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't need to. I took a step back. The ground felt unsteady under my feet. That's not how things work, I said. He didn't argue. He just looked at me with something close to pity. That's how it works here. Silence stretched between us. I looked down at the photo again. The girl's face. Her eyes. That strange frozen smile. She feels real, I said quietly. That was the truth. Out of everything that didn't make sense, that part did. He followed my gaze. For the first time, his expression shifted. Just slightly. Something like discomfort. Don't look at them too long, he said. Why? They start to feel familiar. A cold weight settled in my stomach. What happens if they do? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his head, slowly, toward one of the houses nearby. The door there was slightly open. Just a thin gap. Dark inside. You should find somewhere to stay, he said. The sudden change in topic caught me off guard. I'm not staying here. He looked back at me. You already are. The words landed heavier than anything else he'd said. I shook my head. No, I'll walk back to the road, wait for another bus. He didn't react. There won't be another one tonight, he said. How do you know? He didn't answer. Again, that silence, that same pattern. Like answers only existed up to a certain point, and then stopped. I exhaled slowly, trying to think. Fine, I said. Then I'll find a place to rest, just for the night. He nodded. That would be wise. I hesitated, then held up the photo again. What about her? He didn't even look this time. There is no her. I swallowed. Emily, I said again. The name felt weaker now, like it was slipping. His eyes sharpened slightly. You should stop saying that. Why? Because you're starting to believe it. A quiet fear crept in. What if I do? He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the lines on his face more clearly. They weren't just from age. They looked carved, like something had been pressing into him for a long time. Then you'll start remembering things that never happened, he said. And that's bad. He held my gaze. Yes. I felt my pulse in my ears. Loud, unsteady. I looked back at the photo one more time. The girl's face. Her eyes. For a split second, I thought they moved. Not much. Just a shift. Like she was trying to focus on me. I blinked hard. The image stayed still again. Normal. Just a photo. I let out a slow breath. You saw something, didn't you? The man said. I looked at him. No, but my voice didn't sound convincing. He nodded anyway. Come, he said, turning toward the open house. You can stay there. I hesitated. Every part of me told me not to follow him. But staying out here, alone with those photos watching, that felt worse. So I moved. Slow steps. Careful. As we walked toward the house, I noticed something else. More photos. Closer together here. Almost like they were leading somewhere. Or pointing. I kept my eyes forward. Didn't stop. Didn't look too long. Just like he said. But one detail slipped through anyway. One name. Not faded. Not broken. Clear. I stopped. Wait. He paused but didn't turn. What is it? I pointed to the photo on the wall beside us. The face looked familiar. Too familiar. And underneath, the name was still intact. Sharp. Untouched. I felt my throat tighten. Because it was Emily. It was mine. I didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just stood there, staring at my own face pinned to a wall in a town that didn't exist. And behind me, I heard the man speak. Very softly. Now you understand why we don't remember them. I didn't want to go inside, but I couldn't walk away either. My photo was still there behind me, pinned like all the others. Only mine wasn't fading. That detail stayed in my head as I stepped toward the open door. It felt important. I just didn't know why yet. The man didn't wait for me this time. He had already moved ahead, pushing the door open with a slow, quiet creak. The sound didn't echo. It just disappeared, like the house swallowed it. I paused at the entrance. The air inside felt different. Not colder. Older. Like it had been sitting still for a very long time. You can stay here tonight, he said, standing just inside. No one uses it. No one uses it. The words sounded simple, but something about them felt incomplete. I stepped in anyway. The floor shifted slightly under my weight, not broken, just loose, like it wasn't used to being walked on. A thin layer of dust covered everything. I could see my footprints forming behind me. That gave me a strange sense of relief. At least something here reacted to me. At least something proved I was real. The man moved deeper inside without turning back. There's a room in the back, he said. You can rest there. I looked around slowly. The house was small. A narrow hallway, a sitting area to the left, a table in the center with one chair pulled out, like someone had just stood up and left. I stopped. The chair bothered me. It didn't match the rest of the place. Everything else looked abandoned, forgotten. But that chair, it felt recent. I reached out and touched it. The wood was cold, but not dusty. I pulled my hand back. Has someone been here? I asked. The man didn't answer right away. He stood near the back doorway, half hidden in shadow. Then he said, not for a long time. That didn't match what I was seeing. I looked at the table again. There was something on it. A small object. I stepped closer. A cup. Ceramic. Cracked slightly along the rim. I leaned in. There was something inside. Dark. Dry. Not fresh, but not completely gone either. I didn't touch it. Who lived here? I asked. No one you would know, he replied. Again, not really an answer. I exhaled slowly. This place doesn't feel empty. He turned his head slightly. It is. That made me freeze. What does that mean? But he didn't respond. Instead, he stepped back, further into the darkness of the hallway. "You should rest," he said. "You've traveled a long way." "I don't even remember where I was going," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. That thought had been growing quietly in the back of my mind. Now it was out. Clear. Real. He didn't seem surprised. "It happens," he said. "Why?" No answer. Just that silence again. Like the truth existed, but he wasn't allowed to give it. Or maybe I wasn't allowed to hear it yet. I looked past him toward the back room. Something pulled me forward. Not curiosity. Not exactly. More like recognition. I moved slowly down the hallway. Each step felt heavier. The air grew thicker. I could hear something now. Faint. Almost like breathing. I stopped. Listened. Nothing. Just my own breath. Too loud again. I forced myself to keep going. The room at the end was small. A bed against the wall. A window covered with thin fabric. A dresser in the corner. Simple. Quiet. But something was wrong. I stepped inside and felt it immediately. This room wasn't abandoned. Not like the rest of the house. It felt used. Not recently, but not forgotten either. Like someone had been here long enough to leave something behind and then disappeared without taking it with them. I moved toward the dresser. There was a mirror above it, cracked down the center. I caught my reflection. For a second, I didn't recognize it. Not fully. My face looked the same, but something in my eyes felt distant, like I was looking at someone I used to know. I leaned closer. The crack in the mirror split my face in two. One side clear, the other slightly distorted. I blinked, and for a moment, the reflection didn't. I stepped back quickly. My heart jumped, but not in panic. More like confusion. I looked again. Normal. Just my reflection. Just a broken mirror. I exhaled slowly. Not real, I whispered to myself. But I wasn't sure I believed it. I turned away and opened one of the dresser drawers. Inside, clothes, folded neatly. Not dusty. Not old. Just there. I picked up a shirt. It felt familiar. Too familiar. I turned it over in my hands, then froze. There was a tag inside. A name. Not printed. Written. In black ink. My name. I dropped the shirt. It hit the floor softly. No echo. No reaction. Just stillness. I stepped back. Slow. Careful. "This isn't my house," I said under my breath. But the room didn't argue. It just stayed the same. Quiet. Waiting. I turned toward the bed. There was something on it. A notebook. Thin. Worn at the edges. I hadn't noticed it before. That bothered me. I was sure it hadn't been there when I walked in. But now, it was. I approached slowly. Every step felt like a decision. I picked it up. The cover was soft, slightly bent, like it had been opened many times. I hesitated, then opened it. The first page was blank. Second page too. Third, also blank. I flipped faster, page after page. Nothing, until I stopped, near the middle. There was writing, messy, uneven, like someone had been in a hurry, or scared. I leaned in, tried to read it. I shouldn't have gotten off the bus. My chest tightened. I turned the page. More writing. I thought it was just a stop, just a mistake. My fingers trembled slightly. Next page. They don't remember me. I swallowed. The words felt heavy. Too close. Next page. I found my photo. I stopped breathing for a second. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had moved in just a little. I kept reading. I don't know how long I've been here. My grip tightened on the notebook. Next page. I think I lived in this house. A cold wave moved through me. Slow. Deeper. I looked around the room again. The bed. The dresser. The mirror. Everything felt different now. Not strange. Not unfamiliar. Just distant. Like something I had forgotten. Or forced myself to forget. I looked back down at the notebook. There was one more line. At the bottom of the page. Written darker than the rest. Pressed harder into the paper. If I find this again, it means I already forgot. My hand went still. Completely still. The silence in the room felt heavier now. Not empty. Watching. Waiting. I closed the notebook slowly. And for the first time since I arrived, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just a town where people disappeared. This was a place where they stayed. And forgot. I looked toward the mirror again. Carefully. Slowly. My reflection stared back at me. Tired. Confused. Fatting just a little. I stepped closer. Studied my face. Trying to hold on to it. Trying to remember it. But a new thought crept in. Quiet. Uninvited. What if I've already read this before? I felt something slip. Just a little. Like a memory loosening its grip. I turned quickly toward the door. The man was gone. I hadn't heard him leave. The hallway was empty. The house completely still again. I stood there with the notebook in my hand, surrounded by pieces of a life that might be mine, and realized something worse than being trapped. Something quieter, more final. I didn't know how many times I had already been here. And somewhere deep inside that thought, another question began to form. If I keep forgetting, then who keeps writing the warnings? I tried to hold on to one simple thing, just one, and it slipped away anyway. I stood there in that room, the notebook still in my hand, repeating a thought over and over in my head. Why did I come here? It sounded like an easy question, something I should answer without thinking. But every time I reached for it, it moved, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. You know it was there. You can feel it. But the details, they don't stay. I pressed my fingers against my temple. Focused. I was going somewhere, I whispered. That part felt true. I took a bus. Also true. I could still see it, the dark road, the empty seats, the driver who never looked back. Then, nothing. A blank space. Like someone had cut the rest out. I opened my eyes slowly. The room felt quieter now. Too quiet. Even my breathing sounded distant. I looked down at the notebook again. The words I had just read, they already felt softer. Less sharp. I flipped back to the page. The writing was still there. I shouldn't have gotten off the bus. I traced the line with my finger. It should have scared me. It did a few seconds ago. But now, it felt like I was reading something someone else wrote. Not me. Not really. I swallowed. No, I said quietly, I wrote this. I had to. The name in the clothes. The photo outside. This room. It all pointed to me. But the feeling didn't match. It didn't feel like mine. That was the worst part. Not the fear. Not the confusion. Just the distance. Like my own life was happening to someone else. I closed the notebook and held it tighter. Okay, I whispered, think. I needed something solid. Something that wouldn't move. Something real. So I started simple. My name. I opened my mouth. And stopped. It was there. Right there. But I couldn't say it. Not because I didn't know it. Because it didn't feel right. Like trying to say a word in a language you almost understand. Close, but not yours. I felt my chest tighten. Say it, I told myself. But nothing came out. Just silence. I stepped back from the dresser. The mirror caught my movement. I looked at it again. Carefully, slowly. My reflection looked the same. Same face. Same eyes. But something was missing. Not physically. Something inside. Something small but important. I leaned closer. Who are you? I whispered. The reflection didn't answer. Of course it didn't. But for a second, I expected it to. That scared me more than anything else so far. I turned away quickly. The room felt tighter now, like it was closing in. I needed air. I moved toward the door. Fast. Too fast. My shoulder brushed the wall, leaving a faint mark in the dust. That made me stop. I turned back, looked at the mark. Fresh, clear, proof that I was still here. Still real. I exhaled slowly, then noticed something else. Below the mark, there were others. Faint, almost gone. Like someone had brushed against the wall many times before. Same height, same shape, same place. I stepped closer, ran my fingers over them. Cold, worn, repeated. A quiet realization settled in. I've done this before. Not once, not twice, many times. I pulled my hand back slowly. No, I whispered. But the evidence was right there, layered into the wall itself. I turned and walked out of the room. The hallway stretched ahead of me, longer than before. Or maybe it just felt that way. The house had changed again. Subtle, but enough to notice. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper. I moved toward the front room, each step careful, listening, watching. The chair by the table. It was different now. Closer. I was sure it hadn't been that close before. I stared at it, tried to remember, but the memory wouldn't settle. It kept shifting, like everything else. I approached slowly. The cup was still there. Same crack, same dark stain inside. But now, there was something next to it. A piece of paper, folded once. I didn't remember seeing it before. That didn't mean anything anymore. I reached out, picked it up, unfolded it. The handwriting looked familiar. Same uneven lines, same pressure. My breath slowed as I read. Don't trust him. I froze. The words felt heavier than anything in the notebook. Simple, clear, direct. I looked toward the hallway. Empty, silent. He, I whispered. The man. The one who brought me here. The one who said this place wasn't empty. The one who knew about the bus. My grip tightened on the paper. "Why not?" I asked out loud. No answer. Just that silence again. But now it felt different. Not empty. Listening. Waiting for me to understand. I looked back at the note. Turned it over. There was more on the back. Shorter. Messier. Like it had been written in a hurry. "He remembers." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Slow. Deep. Everyone else forgets. That's what he said. But him. He remembers. Everything. I swallowed hard. "Why?" I whispered. And then another thought followed. If he remembers, then he knows me. Not just now, but before. Every time. I felt something shift inside me. Not fear this time. Something sharper. Something closer to clarity. I looked toward the door. It was slightly open. Just like before. A thin line of darkness beyond it. The town. The photos. My phone. I took a step forward. Then stopped. Another thought. Quiet, but strong. If I keep forgetting, then how did I leave myself warnings? The notebook. The note. The marks on the wall. That meant one thing. I knew this would happen. Every time. I planned for it. But something went wrong. Because I was still here. Still repeating. Still losing pieces. I looked down at my hands. They felt less steady. Less certain. Like they didn't fully belong to me anymore. I clenched them into fists. Tried to feel something solid. But even that felt delayed. Like my body was a second behind my thoughts. I stepped toward the door again. Slower this time. More careful. The wood creaked softly under my feet. The sound stretched longer than it should. Like it didn't want to end. I reached the door. Placed my hand on it. Cold. Still. I pushed it open slightly more. The outside looked the same. Dark. Quiet. Unmoving. But something felt different. The air. The weight of it. Like the town was closer now. Watching more carefully. I stepped outside. The gravel shifted under my feet. That sound again. Crunch. Real. Still real. I looked down the road. The photos were still there. But now, more of them were faded. Faces losing shape. Names disappearing. And mine. I searched for it. Found it. Still clear. Still sharp. Still waiting. I stared at it. Longer than before. Trying to remember the person in the picture. Trying to feel something. Anything. But all I felt was distance. Like looking at a stranger I should recognize. I stepped closer. Lifted my hand slowly. Almost touched it. Then stopped. A new thought cut through everything else. What if that's how it starts? The man's voice echoed faintly in my head. Don't look at them too long. I pulled my hand back quickly. My heart was beating faster now. Not panic. Awareness. Something was happening. Something I couldn't see yet. But I could feel it. I turned slightly. Looked down the street. The houses. The open doors. The empty windows. And then I saw him. The man. Standing at the far end of the road. Watching me. Exactly where the figure had been before. Same stillness. Same silence. Like he had never moved. Like he had always been there. Waiting. I felt the paper in my hand. Don't trust him. He remembers. I looked back at my photo, then at him, then back again, and a final thought settled in. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. If he remembers everything, then he knows something I keep forgetting. And if I keep forgetting, then maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know why I'm really here. The call came at exactly 2:17 a.m., and the line was already open when I picked it up. No ringing, no click, just breathing, soft, uneven, like someone had been holding the phone for a while, waiting for me. I froze for a second, my hand still resting on the receiver. That wasn't normal. Calls don't just connect like that. Emergency dispatch, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What's your emergency? The breathing stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Dead quiet. For a moment, I thought the line had dropped. I pulled the receiver away slightly, checked it, then brought it back to my ear. Still connected. Still silent. Hello, I tried again. Can you hear me? A pause. Then, she's not supposed to be here. The voice was small. A girl's voice. Young. Maybe 12, 13 at most. And she sounded calm. Too calm. Like she wasn't scared of what she was saying. She was just stating it. She who, I asked. No answer. Just that quiet again. Then the breathing came back. Softer this time. Closer. I leaned forward slightly in my chair. Can you tell me your name? I asked. Another pause. Longer. Like she had to think about it. I don't think I have one anymore. Something cold moved through my chest. That's okay, I said gently. You don't have to tell me your name, just tell me where you are. I'm at home. Simple. Normal. But something about the way she said it didn't feel real. Okay, I said, what's your address? Silence. Then, I don't think this place has one. My fingers tightened slightly around the receiver. Every house has an address, I said. Look outside, there should be a number somewhere. I can't go outside. Why not? A small breath. Then, because she's out there. My heart slowed. Not faster. Slower. I asked. No. The answer came quickly. Sharp. Not he. I swallowed. Okay, who is she? Another pause. Then the girl spoke again, softer this time. She looks like me. I felt a strange pressure behind my eyes. What do you mean? She's standing in the yard, the girl said, just looking at the house. Her voice didn't shake. That was the part that bothered me. Kids get scared. They cry. They whisper. But this was something else. How long has she been there? I asked. I don't know. Did you just notice her? No. A pause. She's been there since before it got dark. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:17 a.m. How long ago did it get dark where you are? Silence. Then, I don't remember. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Something wasn't lining up. Okay, I said carefully. Are your parents home? Another pause. Longer this time. They were. That word. Were. Where are they now? I think they left. Think. I heard the door open earlier. Did you see them leave? No. Did they say anything to you? No. The line went quiet again. But this time it felt heavier. Like something was building underneath it. Are you alone in the house? I asked. A soft breath. No. My grip tightened. Who else is there? A pause. Then, she is. The words landed slowly, like they didn't belong in the same sentence. You said she's outside. She was. My chest tightened. What do you mean, was? Silence. Then the girl whispered, I can't see her anymore. I stood up from my chair. Didn't even realize I had done it. Listen to me, I said, my voice firmer now. I need you to go somewhere safe. Lock a door. Stay on the line with me. I'm already in my room. Is the door locked? Yes. Good, stay there. Don't open it for anyone. A pause. Then, she's inside. The words were so quiet, I almost didn't hear them. What? I think she came in. My heart started beating faster now. Did you hear something? Yes. What did you hear? Footsteps. Where? In the hallway. A faint sound came through the line. Not her breathing. Something else. Soft. Dull. Like a step. I froze. Did you hear that? I asked. Yes. Another step. Closer this time. My skin went cold. Stay calm, I said quickly. Stay very quiet, don't make a sound. The girl didn't respond, but I could hear her breathing again. Faster now. Finally. Human. Can you hide? I whispered. I'm under the bed. Good, stay there, don't move. The footsteps came again. Slow. Careful. Like something was trying not to be heard, but wasn't very good at it. I pressed the receiver tighter against my ear, trying to catch every sound, every detail. Is your door still closed? I asked. A small pause. Then, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I can't see it from here. Another step. Closer. Then, a soft creak, like a door opening. My throat tightened. Did you hear that? I asked. Yes. Her voice was barely there now. She's in my room. The words sent a chill straight through me. Don't look, I whispered. Whatever you do, don't look. Silence. Then, I think she's looking at me. My breath caught. How do you know? A pause. Then, because I can feel it. The room around me felt colder, smaller, like the walls were closing in. Stay still, I said. She might leave. I don't think she will. Why not? A long pause. Long enough that I thought the line had dropped again. Then, because she's smiling, I closed my eyes for a second, trying to think, trying to stay focused. Listen to me, I said. I'm sending someone to your location. I just need you to tell me where you are. I told you, she whispered. This place doesn't have a name. It has to, I said. Every place does. Not this one. Another sound came through the line. Closer now. Lower. Like breathing. But not hers. Something else. Something heavier. Is she moving? I asked. A pause. Then, she's kneeling down. My grip tightened on the receiver. Stay still, I whispered again. I am. What is she doing now? Another pause. Then the girl's voice changed. Just slightly. She's looking closer. My heart pounded in my chest. Don't react, I said. Pretend you're not there. I think she knows. How? A pause. Then, because she's copying me. I felt something shift inside me. What do you mean? She's breathing the same way I am. The line filled with that sound. 2 sets of breathing now. Perfectly in sync. I swallowed hard. Okay, I said slowly. Listen to me, I need you to do something. What? I need you to hold your breath. A pause. Then, why? Just trust me. The breathing continued, then stopped. Complete silence. For 1 second, 2, 3, then another breath, but only one, not two. I leaned forward. Is she still there? I whispered. No answer. Hello? Still nothing. Then she stopped. My chest tightened. What do you mean? She's not breathing anymore. Relief washed over me. Brief. Small. Good, I said. That's good, maybe she left. I don't think so. The relief faded instantly. Why? A pause. Then, because I can still see her. My stomach dropped. What is she doing now? Another pause. Then the girl whispered. She's smiling wider. I felt the air leave my lungs slowly. And she's holding something. What? A longer pause this time. Long enough to feel wrong. Then, the phone. My hand went cold around the receiver. What do you mean? She's holding a phone, the girl said, just like me. I stared at the desk in front of me, at my own hand, at the receiver pressed against my ear. And for the first time since the call started, something didn't feel right. Can you hear her? The girl asked suddenly. My throat went dry. What? Listen carefully, she said. I held my breath, focused, and then I heard it. Very faint, very far, but clear. Another voice. On the line. Not the girl. Something else. Something copying my own breathing. I pulled the receiver away slightly, then brought it back. The sound stayed. Perfect. Matched. My breathing. My movements. My silence. Do you hear it? She whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something that didn't make sense. Something that shouldn't be possible. The call didn't feel like it was coming from her anymore. It felt like it was coming from me. I didn't tell anyone about the call, but I couldn't forget the road she mentioned. It stayed with me. Not the girl's voice. Not even the thing breathing on the line. Just one detail. The place she said she was. No address. At first, that sounded like confusion. Fear. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like something else. Something real. Something I had heard before. So I went back through the old reports. Cases that didn't go anywhere. Calls that ended too quickly. People who vanished without a trace. It took a few hours. Maybe more. Time felt strange that night. Like it wasn't moving properly. But then I found it. A pattern. Not obvious. Not clean. But there. A stretch of road that showed up again and again. Different callers. Different years. Same description. No address. No landmarks. Just a road. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the file. It didn't even have a proper name. Just a note someone had typed years ago. Unmarked route, possibly rural, no confirmed location. That should have been the end of it. Just another dead lead. But it was, because the calls didn't stop. They just disappeared. Cut off mid-sentence. Every time. And now I had one of my own. I closed the file slowly. Then opened a map. Zoomed out. Looked at every road in the area. Every highway, every side path, nothing matched. Everything had a name. Everything had a number. Except one gap, a thin stretch between two marked roads. Empty. No label. No data. Like something had been erased. I stared at it for a long time, then made a decision I shouldn't have made. I went to find it. The drive took longer than it should have. The roads twisted more than I remembered. Signs appeared, then disappeared when I looked again. Even my GPS started acting strange. It kept recalculating, turning me around, trying to pull me away from that empty stretch. But I kept going, slow, careful, like I was following something I couldn't see. Eventually, the main road ended. Just like that. No warning. No sign. Just dirt. I stopped the car. Sat there for a moment. Listening. The engine idled softly. The only sound in the world. I looked ahead. The road continued, but it didn't look official. No markings. No lines. Just a narrow path cutting through open land. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. I stepped out of the car. The air felt different here. Still, heavy, like it had been waiting. I closed the door quietly. The sound didn't travel far. It just dropped. I started walking. Each step felt louder than it should. Gravel crunching under my shoes. Echoing slightly, but not in a normal way. Like the sound was being repeated. Softly, behind me. I stopped. Turned. Nothing. Just my car. Still. Silent. I told myself it was nothing. Just nerves. But I didn't fully believe it. I kept walking. The road stretched ahead, straight and endless. No curves. No signs. No life. After a few minutes, I noticed something. Tire marks. Faint. Barely there. But recent. I knelt down. Ran my fingers over them. They felt fresh. Like someone had driven here not long ago. That didn't make sense. If this road didn't exist, then who was using it? I stood up slowly, looked ahead again, and that's when I saw it. A car, far down the road, parked on the side. Dark, still. I felt that same slow pressure build in my chest. I started walking toward it. Careful, watching. The closer I got, the clearer it became. The driver's door was open, just slightly, like someone had stepped out and never closed it. I stopped a few feet away, listened. Nothing. No wind. No insects. Just that heavy silence. I moved closer, looked inside. Empty. The keys were still in the ignition. I reached in, turned them slightly. The engine didn't respond. Dead. I pulled my hand back. Something felt wrong. Not just the car, the air around it. Like it had been sitting here longer than it should. But the tire marks were fresh. I stepped back, looked down the road again, and then I saw it. Another car, further ahead, smaller, almost hidden by the distance. I narrowed my eyes. There was something off about it. I started walking again, faster this time. The second car came into view, then a third, and a fourth, all lined along the side of the road. All empty, all silent, each one with doors slightly open, like people had stepped out at the same time. I slowed down. My breathing felt heavier now. Not from walking, from something else. Something pressing in. I approached the nearest car. Looked inside. A phone sat on the seat. Screen cracked. Dark. I picked it up. Pressed the button. Nothing. No power. I turned it over. There was a small sticker on the back. A name. Worn. Faded. I couldn't read it fully, but I could see the first two letters. M. My stomach tightened. I dropped the phone. Stepped back. That name again. It followed me. From the town. From the photos. Now here. I turned slowly. Looked at the line of cars. Counted them. 6. No. 7. All abandoned. All leading further down the road. Like a trail. Or a warning. I didn't know which. I kept walking. I shouldn't have. But I did. Because something pulled me forward. Not curiosity. Something deeper. Like I needed to see the end. The road narrowed slightly. The air grew colder. Heavier. And then I saw the house. Small. Alone. At the end of the road. Lights off. Door open. I stopped. Every part of me told me to turn back. To leave. To forget this place. But another thought pushed through. Quiet. Persistent. What if this is where the call came from? I took a step forward. Then another. The house didn't move. Didn't react. Just waited. Like everything else here. I reached the front door. Placed my hand on it. Cold. Still. I pushed it open slightly. The inside was dark. But not empty. I could feel it. That same feeling from the call. From the girl's voice. From the breathing. I stepped inside. Slow. Careful. The floor creaked under my weight. The sound stretched, echoed, then faded. I listened. And then I heard it. A faint sound. From somewhere deeper in the house. Soft. Uneven. Familiar. Breathing. I froze. My chest tightened. Because I knew that sound. I had heard it before. On the phone. At 2:17 a.m. I took one more step inside. The darkness shifted slightly. Not visibly. Just enough to feel. And then a thought hit me. Sudden. Clear. Cold. What if the call wasn't asking for help? What if it was leading me here? I stood there in the doorway, listening to that same quiet breathing echo through the house, and realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. This road didn't just make people disappear. It brought them somewhere. And whatever was inside this house, it was still answering calls. The recording was still there, even though it shouldn't have been. I found it buried in an old archive folder. No label. No date. Just a time stamp. 2:17 a.m. My hand hovered over the mouse for a second before I clicked it. Something about it felt familiar. Not in a normal way. More like something I had already heard, but couldn't remember when. I pressed play. Static filled the speakers. Soft. Low. Then, breathing. My chest tightened instantly. I knew that sound. Not just from memory. From something deeper. Like my body recognized it before my mind did. I leaned closer. Listened carefully. The breathing wasn't steady. It came in short bursts. like someone was trying to stay quiet but couldn't. Then the voice came. "She's not supposed to be here." I froze. The exact same words. Same tone. Same calm voice. The girl. It was her. Exactly the same. Not similar. Not close. The same. Every pause. Every breath. Every word. Perfect. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just listened. "This is dispatch," a voice replied. My voice, but not mine. Older, slightly different tone, but unmistakable. It was me. I felt my stomach drop. "What's your emergency?" The recording continued. Same conversation. Same questions. Same answers. Every detail matched. Even the moments where I hesitated. Even the parts where I didn't know what to say. It was all there. Already recorded. Already done. I reached for the keyboard. Paused it. The room went silent. Too silent. I sat back slowly, trying to process what I had just heard. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. This recording was old. Years old. The file properties confirmed it. At least that's what they said. But I had taken that call. Recently. I remembered it. Or I thought I did. I pressed play again. The sound filled the room. The breathing. The voice. My voice. Then, "Can you hear her?" The girl's words echoed through the speakers. I leaned forward again. That part, that was where it changed, where something didn't feel right. I listened carefully. And then, I heard it. The second breathing. Faint, almost hidden. But there, matching, mirroring, perfect. I pulled off my headset slowly. But the sound didn't stop. It was still there. Soft. Close. I turned my head slightly. The room was empty. Light steady. Everything normal. Except the breathing. It wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was behind me. I didn't turn around. Not immediately. I just sat there listening, counting each breath. 1, 2, 3. Matched. Perfectly. I swallowed hard. Then turned. Slow. Careful. Nothing. Just the empty office. Rows of desks. Dark monitors. Still air. The breathing stopped. Just like that. Gone. I let out a slow breath of my own. Shaky. Unsteady. "It's in your head," I whispered. But the words didn't feel true. I turned back to the screen. The recording was still playing. The conversation had moved forward. The girl was under the bed now, describing the thing in her room. "She's copying me." My skin went cold. I leaned in again, focused, trying to hear something new, something different, something that would prove this wasn't the same call. But there was nothing. It was identical. Every word, every pause, every breath, until something changed. A small detail, easy to miss, but I caught it. The timestamp. It flickered, just for a second, then shifted. 2:17 a.m. Then 2:18. Then back to 2:17. I frowned. That wasn't possible. Recordings don't change like that. I watched it closely. The seconds ticked forward, then slipped back. like time inside the file wasn't stable. I reached out, paused it again. The timestamp froze. 2:17 a.m. Exactly. I leaned back. My mind started connecting things. The road, the house, the girl, the breathing, and now this. A call that didn't end, didn't move forward, just repeated. I opened the file details again, looked closer. There were multiple entries. Same file, same name, different dates, years apart. Each one logged at 2:17 a.m. Each one the same length, the same call, copied over and over. I felt a slow, heavy realization settle in. This wasn't one recording. It was many, all identical, all happening at different times. I clicked on another one, pressed play. Same static, same breathing, same voice. She's not supposed to be here. I skipped ahead, midway through. Same lines, same tone. I skipped to the end, the moment where the second voice appears, the breathing that matches mine. It was there, exactly the same. I stopped the playback, sat in silence, thinking, trying to understand. If this call repeats, if it's been happening for years, then what does that mean? A thought formed slowly, unclear at first, then sharper. What if it's not a recording? What if it's happening again? I stood up from my chair, looked around the room. Everything felt off now. Subtle, but enough to notice. The lights flickered slightly, just once, then steadied. I checked the clock on the wall. 2:16 a.m. My chest tightened. No, I whispered. That wasn't possible. I had been here for hours. Time shouldn't be. The second hand moved. Tick. 2:17. The lights dimmed for a split second, then returned, and the phone rang. Loud, sharp, breaking the silence. I froze, stared at it, didn't move. The ringing continued, steady, unchanging, like it had all the time in the world. I stepped closer, slow, careful. My hand hovered over the receiver. I knew what would happen if I picked it up. I already heard it. I already lived it. Or I was about to. I swallowed hard, then lifted the receiver, put it to my ear. Silence. Then, breathing. Soft. Uneven. Exactly the same. I closed my eyes for a second, tried to steady myself. This is dispatch, I said. My voice sounded different, distant, like I was hearing it from somewhere else. What's your emergency? The breathing stopped. Then the voice came. She's not supposed to be here. I didn't react this time. I couldn't. I already knew what she would say. What I would say. Every step. Every word. It was all set. Like a script I couldn't change. I tried anyway. Listen, I said quickly. I need you to. But the words didn't come out the way I wanted. They changed. Shifted. What's your name? I heard myself ask instead. My grip tightened. No, I whispered. But the conversation kept moving. Without me. Through me. I listened as I asked the same questions. Got the same answers. Followed the same path. I was inside it now. Not listening. Living it. Again. And then. Something broke. A small detail. Different. When the girl said, "Can you hear her?" I didn't answer. I stayed silent. The line held. The moment stretched. Longer than before. And then, "Hello," she whispered. Her voice changed slightly. Uncertain. That wasn't supposed to happen. My heart started beating faster. This was new. This wasn't in the recording. "Hello," she said again. I stayed quiet. Then, something else spoke. Not her. Not me. A third voice. Soft. Close. Right next to the receiver. "She can hear you." I froze. The words didn't come through the phone. They came from behind me. I turned slowly. The room was empty. But the voice continued. "She always can." My grip on the receiver tightened. "What are you?" I whispered. No answer. Just breathing. Matching mine. Again, the girl's voice returned. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. I didn't know what to say, because I wasn't sure anymore. Was I talking to her? To myself? Or to something that had been listening this whole time? The line filled with silence. Heavy. Waiting. And then the girl whispered something that wasn't in any recording. Something new. Something wrong. She says you've done this before. My chest tightened. Who says? A pause. Then, the one standing behind you. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew what I would see. Or worse, what I wouldn't. The breathing got closer, perfectly in sync with mine. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The call never ends. It doesn't hang up. It doesn't stop. It just waits for the next time I answer it. The sheriff knew about the crime before I told him, and that's when I realized I might already be too late. I was standing outside the station, phone still in my hand, staring at the yellow tape stretched across the front of a small house. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had just arrived. No report filed. No call made. And yet everything was already in motion. Officers moving quietly. A coroner van parked crooked near the curb. The front door of the house slightly open, like someone had left in a hurry, or something had gone inside. I stepped closer, my shoes crunching softly on the gravel. No one stopped me. No one even looked at me. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I wasn't from here. Small towns notice strangers. But here, I felt invisible. Didn't expect you this early. The voice came from behind me. Low. Calm. Too calm. I turned. The sheriff stood a few feet away, hands resting loosely at his sides. Tall. Older. Face lined in a way that didn't look like age, but repetition. Like he had lived the same day too many times. You knew I was coming, I asked. He smiled slightly. Not friendly. Not unfriendly. Just certain. You always come, he said. My chest tightened. After something like this, I said, gesturing toward the house, of course I would. He nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't leave mine. You say that every time. A quiet pressure built in my head. That doesn't make sense, I said. He didn't argue. He just turned and started walking toward the house. You should see it, he said. I hesitated, then followed, because part of me needed to understand. And another part already knew I wouldn't. The inside of the house smelled faintly of something metallic. Not strong, just enough to notice. The living room was small, furniture neat, undisturbed, except for one thing. A chair, pulled out slightly from the table. I stopped. That detail felt familiar. Too familiar. "Do you see it?" the sheriff asked. I looked at him. "See what?" He pointed. "The chair. Every time," he said. "Every time what?" He didn't answer. Just kept walking. I followed him into the hallway. The air felt heavier here. Thicker, like it didn't want to move. We reached the bedroom. The door was open. Inside, there was a bed, a dresser, a mirror, cracked down the center. My breath caught slightly. Not from fear, from recognition. "I've seen this before," I whispered. The sheriff nodded. "Yes." I stepped inside slowly. The floor creaked under my weight. The sound stretched longer than it should. I looked at the mirror. My reflection stared back, split in two. Something about it felt off, like it wasn't fully connected to me. "Where is the body?" I asked. "In the next room," he said. "But you don't need to see that." "Why not?" "Because you already know." I turned toward him. "I don't." He studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "You will." A cold feeling settled in my chest. I moved to the dresser, opened one of the drawers. Clothes, folded neatly, not disturbed. I reached in, picked up a shirt. There was writing inside the tag. Black ink, uneven. My fingers tightened. I didn't look at it yet. Didn't want to. "Go on," the sheriff said. I turned the fabric slowly. Looked. My name, written clearly. My breath slowed. Heavy, unsteady. "This isn't possible," I said. The sheriff didn't respond. I dropped the shirt, stepped back. The room felt smaller now, like it was closing in. "I don't live here," I said. "No," he replied, "you don't stay." That word again. Stay. What does that mean? He took a step closer. "You pass through," he said, "just like the others." My mind struggled to catch up. "What others?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the mirror. "Do you remember the call?" My chest tightened instantly. "What call?" He watched me carefully. "The one that brings you here." A faint sound echoed in my head. Breathing. Soft. Uneven. 2:17 a.m. I swallowed. "I don't." "You do," he said gently. "You just haven't reached that part yet." A quiet fear started to build. Not sharp. Not sudden. Just steady. Like something slowly rising. "You knew about this before I got here," I said. "Yes." "How?" He paused, then smiled again. That same small, certain smile. "Because it already happened." My head felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on it. "That doesn't make sense." "It will." "When?" He looked at the mirror again, then back at me. "When you hear it again." The words settled slowly. Too slowly. I stepped back toward the doorway. Needed space. Needed distance. "This place," I said, looking around, "it feels wrong." He nodded. "It is." "Then why are you here?" A pause. Then, "Because I never left." My chest tightened again. "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past me, into the hallway. I followed. We moved toward the back of the house. Another room. Darker. Colder. "This is where it ends," he said. I stopped at the doorway. "Didn't go in." "Ends?" I asked. "For you," he replied. Something in his tone changed. Softer. Almost sympathetic. I looked into the room. It was empty. At first. Then my eyes adjusted. And I saw it. A phone. Lying on the floor. Old. Wired. The receiver slightly off the hook. I felt my breath slow. The air around me felt familiar. Too familiar. "That's not possible," I whispered. The sheriff stood beside me. Quiet. Watching. "You recognize it," he said. I didn't answer. Because I did. I stepped forward. Slow. Careful. Each step heavier than the last. The phone sat there. Waiting. Like it had been placed just for me. I crouched down. Reached out. My hand trembled slightly. Not from fear. From certainty. I knew what would happen next. Even if I didn't understand how. I lifted the receiver. Held it to my ear. Silence. Then, breathing. Soft. Uneven. Exactly the same. My chest tightened. I closed my eyes. "This is dispatch," I heard myself say. But I hadn't spoken yet. The voice came through the line. My voice. Slightly different. Slightly distant. "What's your emergency?" I opened my eyes slowly. The sheriff was gone. The room felt different. Larger. Empty. Like I was alone again. Then the girl's voice came. "She's not supposed to be here." I stood there, holding the receiver, listening to a call that hadn't happened yet. Or maybe had already happened too many times. And in that moment, I understood something I wasn't ready to accept. The sheriff didn't predict the crimes. He remembered them. Because every time I arrived, every time I picked up that phone, I became part of it. Again, the files weren't supposed to exist, and the fact that they were locked away told me someone knew exactly how wrong they were. I found the basement door by accident. At least, I think it was an accident. The station felt different that night. Quieter than usual. Not peaceful quiet. More like something was being kept still. Like the building itself was holding its breath. I had been walking down the hallway, trying to clear my head after seeing that house, that phone, when I noticed the door. Plain. Gray. No label. Just a small metal sign bolted above the handle. Storage. But something about it felt off. Not the door itself. The air around it. Colder. Heavier. I reached for the handle. Stopped. There was a lock. Old. Scratched. Used often or maybe not at all. I glanced back down the hallway. Empty. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence pressing in from every direction. The sheriff hadn't said anything about a basement. But then again, he hadn't said a lot of things. I pulled out my keys. Tried one. Didn't fit. Tried another. Still nothing. I should have stopped. Walked away. Pretended I never saw it. But something inside me pushed. That same quiet pull I felt on the road. In the house. Like I was being led. I leaned closer to the lock. Studied it. And then I noticed something strange. It wasn't fully closed. Just slightly off. Like someone had locked it, but not completely. I pressed the handle gently. It clicked, opened, slow, quiet. The darkness behind it felt thick. Not empty, not still, just waiting. I stepped inside. The smell hit first. Dust, old paper, something damp underneath it. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step echoing longer than it should. I reached the bottom, felt along the wall, found a switch, clicked it. The light flickered. Once, twice, then settled. Dim, barely enough to see. Rows of shelves lined the room. Boxes stacked unevenly. Files scattered. Nothing organized. Nothing labeled clearly. Like someone didn't want this place to be understood. I moved closer to the nearest shelf. Ran my fingers along the edge of a box. Dust coated my skin instantly. Thick, undisturbed, or almost undisturbed. There were marks, faint, recent, like someone had been here not long ago. I opened the first box. Inside, folders, dozens of them, all worn, all aged. I pulled one out. No official stamp, no case number, just a name written in pen. Messy, uneven. I opened it. Photos slid out slightly. I caught them before they fell. Looked. A house. Familiar. Too familiar. My chest tightened. It was the same house from earlier. Same angle. Same cracked window. Same front door. I flipped the photo over. No date. No notes. Nothing. I checked the rest of the file. Witness statements. Handwritten. Short. Incomplete. She wasn't there before. The room was empty. I heard breathing. My fingers tightened. These weren't official reports. They weren't processed. They weren't even filed properly. They were just kept. Hidden. I grabbed another folder. Opened it. Another house. Different location. Same feeling. Same kind of statements. He said someone was inside. But there was no one. The phone was still on. My heart started beating faster. I moved quicker now. Opening more files. More photos. More statements. Different names. Different places. Same pattern. Someone disappears. No record. No report. Just these files. Buried. Forgotten. Or hidden on purpose. I stepped back from the shelf. Tried to process what I was seeing. This wasn't one case. It was dozens. Maybe more. All unreported. All erased. Except for this place. A cold realization settled in. The sheriff knew. He had to. This was his station. His records. But he never mentioned any of this. Why? I turned slowly, scanning the room, and that's when I saw it. A desk, in the corner, small, out of place, cleaner than everything else. I walked toward it, careful. There was a single folder sitting on top, closed, neat, different from the rest. I reached out, hesitated, then opened it. Inside, one page, just one, typed, not handwritten, official, almost. I read the first line. Subject: repeat caller 2, 17 a.m. My chest tightened. I read further. Pattern observed across multiple years. Same voice. Same report. no traceable origin. My hands started to shake slightly. This wasn't just about the houses or the disappearances. This was about the call. My call. I kept reading. Responding officers report no victim found. Locations inconsistent. Evidence non-persistent. Non-persistent. The word stuck with me. Like nothing stayed. Nothing lasted. Everything reset. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature. Faded, but still readable. The sheriff. My chest felt heavy. He didn't just know. He had been tracking this. For years. Maybe longer. I flipped the page over. There was something written on the back. Not typed. Handwritten. Messy. Rushed. If you're reading this, you've already answered the call. I froze. The air felt colder instantly. I read it again. Slow. Careful. If you're reading this, you've already answered the call. My breathing grew shallow. That didn't make sense. Or maybe it did. Maybe too much. A faint sound echoed behind me. Soft. Uneven. Breathing. I turned quickly. The room was empty. But the sound didn't stop. It moved. Closer. Then further. Like it was circling. I stepped back toward the desk. My hand brushed against something. Another folder. Hidden underneath. I pulled it out. Opened it. Photos. Different from the others. Blurry. Distorted. Like they weren't meant to be taken. I looked closer. People. Standing in rooms. Looking confused. Lost. Their faces. Familiar. My chest tightened. I flipped to the next photo. Then the next. And then I stopped. My fingers froze. There I was, standing in a room, holding a phone. My expression, empty, like I didn't understand where I was. I dropped the photo, stepped back. No, I whispered. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But deep down, something inside me knew it was. The breathing got louder, closer, right behind me now. I didn't turn. I couldn't, because I already knew what I would see. Or worse, what I wouldn't. The lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. The sound stopped. Just like that. Gone. I stood there frozen, surrounded by files that shouldn't exist, reading cases that were never reported, seeing myself in places I didn't remember being. And one thought kept repeating in my head, over and over. If these cases were never reported, if these people were never found, then who wrote all of this? And why was I already part of it? The knock came just after midnight, sharp, hard, not the kind that makes you jump, but the kind that cuts through the quiet like a blade. I froze before even moving. My heart had this hitch, like it already knew who it was. I opened the door slowly. Outside, the sheriff stood under the weak porch light. His hat shadowed his eyes, but I could feel him looking straight through me. No smile, no greeting, just that quiet, deliberate stare that always made my skin crawl. "You shouldn't be out this late," he said, voice low, calm, but carrying weight. Something in the pause after his words made me uneasy, like he wasn't talking about me exactly. I wasn't going far, I stammered, though it was half a lie. I had been packing, thinking about the files, the basement, all those unsolved cases. The air outside felt different, denser, heavy, like it was waiting. He shifted, hands in his coat pockets. "It's watching," he said, just that. and then he tilted his head slightly. The town, every corner, every street. I laughed nervously, watching who. He didn't answer, just stared at the shadows stretching across the yard. I followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the faint outlines of houses, trees, the streetlights flickering weakly in the wind. But I felt it too, that sense of being observed. "You've been digging," he continued, "into things better left alone." My stomach tightened. "I'm just curious," he said sharply. "I know." His words cut through me like ice. How could he know? How could anyone know what I was thinking so precisely? I looked down at the ground, trying to collect myself. The wind stirred leaves across the porch. A crow cawed somewhere down the street. The ordinary sounds of a town sleeping, but nothing felt ordinary. "You're not safe here," he said finally. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" I asked, though a part of me already feared the answer. He stepped closer. The light caught his face just enough. His eyes were dark, almost too empty, yet full of something I couldn't name. "It doesn't like attention, doesn't like being noticed, and right now you've noticed too much." The words hit me harder than anything I could have imagined. Not a warning, not advice, a statement, a fact. I swallowed, trying to find something to say. My throat went dry. "What is it?" He shook his head slowly. "Not something I can explain. Not yet. Just stay inside tonight. Lock your doors. Don't look out the windows. Don't answer the phone. Whatever happens, don't let it see you." I blinked, trying to process. My hands were trembling. He wasn't exaggerating. The air seemed thicker now, pressing against my chest like something invisible was watching me through the porch, through the streets, through every shadow. "And if it knocks?" I asked, though the words tasted wrong in my mouth. He didn't answer immediately, just fixed me with that same unreadable stare. Finally, he said, "Don't open the door, ever." The wind gusted suddenly, rattling the screen door. Leaves skittered across the porch. Something moved at the edge of the yard. I saw it, but it was anything familiar, just a dark shape, watching, waiting. The sheriff's hand rested briefly on my shoulder, heavy, solid. Then he was gone. The knock of his boots faded into the night just like that, and I was left alone. I closed the door slowly, heart hammering, locked it twice. The chain rattled when I tested it. Safe, I told myself, for now. But then I heard it from the street, slow, deliberate, a knock, not loud, not forceful, just enough. Enough to know someone or something was out there. I pressed my back against the door, eyes wide, listening, waiting. The seconds stretched, minutes maybe, I couldn't tell. Another knock, closer this time. I wanted to run, wanted to look out the window just a peek, but I remembered the sheriff's warning, "Don't let it see you." The room felt smaller suddenly, airtight, my own breath too loud, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sat down on the floor, back against the wall. The knocks continued, soft, patient. Every so often a pause, then another. The rhythm was wrong, not human. I thought about the basement, about the files, about all the people whose disappearances were never reported, about how the sheriff knew everything, how he watched over the town for decades, silent, observing. And I realized maybe it wasn't him watching, maybe it was something else, something patient, something that had always been here, waiting. The knock stopped. For a long moment, just silence. Then the air shifted, cold, heavy. The shadows in the corners of my room stretched, moving without reason. My eyes tracked them, but there was nothing there. Until the last knock, right at my door, not on the wood, on the chain, slow, deliberate. I pressed my forehead against the wall, tried to steady my breathing, tried to tell myself it was the wind, a branch, a trick of the night. But the truth was deeper, clearer. Something had been watching this town, watching me, waiting for the right moment. And now it knew I was awake. I couldn't stay, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. The sheriff had been right. And I knew with that sinking certainty that this night was just the beginning. Because whatever was out there, it didn't knock by mistake. It knocked because it wanted me to answer. And deep down, I already had. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I descended into the basement beneath the station. It smelled of damp concrete and rust, the kind of smell that lingers in places meant to be forgotten. I held my flashlight steady, but the beam barely pierced the darkness. Every shadow seemed alive, shifting, waiting. I shouldn't have come here. I knew it. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to climb those stairs and never look down again. But curiosity had a grip on me, the kind that won't loosen until it's satisfied or destroyed. The sheriff had warned me once, weeks ago, about watching, about staying inside, about the things that didn't like to be noticed. I had nodded, pretending to understand, but deep down I didn't. Not until now. Boxes lined the walls, old files dusty, stacked haphazardly, some labeled with years I didn't recognize, others just numbers, but the air felt heavier here, thicker, like every secret kept beneath this floor had weight. I knelt and picked up the nearest folder. The edges crumbled under my fingers. Inside were photos, grainy, black and white, but the faces were clear enough. Missing people, disappearances that had never been reported, names I didn't recognize, dates that didn't make sense. And then I saw it. A photograph that froze me mid-breath. The sheriff, or what looked like him, but younger, standing in front of the station decades ago. The date on the corner, impossible. He hadn't been alive then, not by any record, not by any story anyone told. My hand shook, dropping the folder. The files tumbled to the floor, a paper avalanche echoing in the hollow basement. And I realized something worse. The shadows seemed to lean closer, responding to my discovery. I backed up, my eyes scanning the room. That's when I noticed the grate in the far corner, not like the others. Newer, clean edges, as if someone had made sure it stayed hidden. My pulse quickened. The sheriff had been hiding something here, something big. I crawled toward it, the flashlight trembling in my grip. The metal felt cold under my fingers. There were scratches around the edges, marks like claws, old and fresh at the same time. Whoever, or whatever, had been down here wasn't done with this place. The air shifted, not wind, not movement I could see, just a presence. I froze, breath caught in my chest. The sense of being watched, the way the shadows bent, pulled at me. And then I heard it, a soft, deliberate breathing from behind the grate. I swallowed. My voice caught when I asked, "Who's there?" Nothing, only the faintest scrape, a metal-on-concrete whisper. I stood, flashlight sweeping the room. Boxes, papers, shadows, nothing moved. Yet the feeling remained. He was here, or something else was tied to him. And every story I had been told about the sheriff, every warning he'd given, suddenly had a weight I couldn't ignore. I crouched again, inspecting the grate. There was a handle, rusted but usable. I pulled. It resisted, then shifted with a groan. Beyond it was darkness so complete it swallowed the flashlight beam. I didn't want to see what lay beyond, and yet I couldn't stop. The air from below was cold, a slow seep of something not quite human. I wanted to turn back, but a flicker of motion drew my gaze. Shadows below, moving against the walls, but not like humans, not like animals, something else, watching, waiting. I took a deep breath and slid the grate open. A narrow stairwell descended, concrete slick and narrow. The walls felt damp, slick under my fingertips. I started down, step by step, trying not to think about the stories I had ignored, the warnings I had brushed aside. Halfway down, I saw scratches along the wall, symbols maybe, or just the marks of claws. They spiraled upward as if whatever had left them had reached toward the floor above, trying to touch the surface world. I swallowed hard. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw something at the bottom. Something standing tall, too still. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became. My lungs burned. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. And then I saw it, a door. Solid metal built into the concrete. Old, rusted, but impossible to ignore. No handle, just a surface that absorbed the light. I reached for it, hand trembling. Something whispered in my head. Not words exactly, but a thought. A warning, don't go further. I froze, and then I laughed bitterly, whispering, too late for that. I pressed my shoulder against the door. It shuddered under my weight. My flashlight caught a reflection like eyes, too many to count, just behind the metal. Watching, waiting. The scratches on the walls seemed to ripple, moving like shadows in water. Then I heard it, a voice, low, hollow, familiar, and yet impossible. Why are you here? I stumbled back, nearly falling. The sound reverberated through the stairwell, through the concrete, not from the sheriff, but from something beneath him, something older, something tied to this place long before he had walked the town streets. I swallowed, trying to steady my shaking hands. I needed to know, I whispered. Some truths, it said, aren't meant for the living. A chill ran through me, not cold from the basement, but from the certainty in that voice. It was watching, judging, waiting to decide whether I could leave. And the thought that the sheriff had been protecting me, or maybe controlling this, it twisted in my stomach. I backed toward the stairs, flashlight swinging. The shadows seemed to reach, curling toward me, pulling at my sleeves, my hair, my thoughts. I felt dizzy, nauseated. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing with life I couldn't explain. And then from behind me a sound, heavy, deliberate footsteps, not mine, slow, approaching. I turned, nothing, but the shadows shifted, bending as if someone had moved through them. I knew he was there, the sheriff, or what he had become, or maybe what he had always been. The fear clawed up my throat. I wanted to run, but the stairs felt farther than before. The metal door loomed behind me. I felt like I had entered a place where time didn't move the same, where everything above ground was a lie. I thought about the missing people, about the files, the photographs, the dates that didn't make sense, about the sheriff standing outside my door weeks ago, watching, knowing, warning. And I realized the truth. Whatever he was, whatever he had been hiding beneath the station, it wasn't human. And if I stayed, if I went further, I might not remain human either. A deep exhale, not mine, from the darkness beyond the door. I gripped the railing, heart hammering. Step by step, I climbed back toward the station floor. Every creak of the stairs sounded like a scream in the silence. I reached the basement door. The air above was warmer, thinner, safer, not completely safe, not yet. I locked the grate behind me. The weight of the shadows pressed from below, a promise or a threat that they were still there, waiting, patient, eternal. I turned to leave the station, but the memory of the metal door, of those eyes behind it, burned in my mind. The sheriff's warnings, the files, the photographs, all pieces of something I wasn't ready to face. And in that moment I understood. The truth buried under the station wasn't just about crimes or secrets. It was about him, about what he had become. And whatever he was, it had been waiting for me long before I knew to look. The station was quiet now, too quiet, but I could feel it, waiting, watching, beneath the floorboards, beneath the concrete, beneath the very air I breathed. And I knew this wasn't the end, not even close. The first time I noticed it, the path wasn't there. I'd walked this stretch of woods 100 times and knew every tree, every fallen branch, every curve in the underbrush. But that morning, the mist had lifted, and a line of crushed earth led away from the old trailhead, straight into the shadows of the forest where nothing should have been. I paused, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The air smelled of wet leaves and something else, something faint and metallic. I wanted to convince myself it was just a new animal trail, maybe a deer or a fox, but the straightness of it, the deliberate width, made my chest tight. I thought about turning back, but the curiosity, that insistent gnawing, wouldn't let me. The path seemed almost to pulse, or maybe that was my imagination. Step by step I followed it, the silence pressing in. Birds usually stirred this early, but today the woods were empty. No chirps, no rustle of small creatures, just the soft, whispering crunch of my own footsteps. Halfway in I noticed the ground. It wasn't just dirt. There were marks, deep grooves like claws or talons had scraped across it. They didn't follow any pattern I could recognize. Unease coiled in my stomach. Something had been here recently, and whatever it was, it hadn't been small. I stopped. My breath came out in quick huffs, clouding in the cool morning air. Something about the light under the trees felt wrong. Too dim. Shadows stretched at angles that didn't make sense. And at the edge of my vision, movement subtle, just a flicker, but enough to make me spin. Nothing, just trees, just the path, straight and unbroken. I kept walking. A faint wind whispered through the branches above, carrying with it the faintest hint of laughter. I froze again. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my legs moved on their own. I had to know. I had to see where it ended. The path curved slightly. A fallen log blocked the way, and when I stepped over it, I saw something that made me stop cold. Footprints. Human footprints, but wrong. The toes were too long, the arches too deep, as if whoever, or whatever, had made them wasn't entirely like us. And they led deeper into the darkness, where the trees grew thicker and the sun didn't reach. I shined my flashlight, though the sun was already up. The beam trembled across the bark and roots, revealing glimpses of something carved into the trees, symbols maybe, or scratches, old but sharp enough to catch the light. My stomach churned. They weren't random. Someone had left these on purpose. I heard it then, a whisper. Or maybe a voice. Low, distant, carried on the wind. I stopped again. "Hello," I called, though my throat was dry, my voice sounding small and fragile against the vast silence of the woods. Nothing. Only the rustling of leaves, but with it the feeling that I was being watched, the sensation prickling along my skin that I wasn't alone. I considered turning back. I really did. But the path continued, a dark ribbon curling through the forest, and somewhere in me, I knew it wouldn't stay if I left. The curiosity had its claws in me. Step by step, I moved forward. The trees thickened, their roots twisting across the ground like veins. Shadows pooled beneath them, and I felt a pressure in the air, heavy and cold. My flashlight flickered. I shook it, cursed softly, and kept going. The prints were still there, but now the spacing had changed. Larger, heavier steps, almost matching my own pace. I spun, flashlight swinging, and again, nothing. Then I heard it clearly, a sound of breaking branches behind me. Not hurried, not frantic, deliberate, patient, waiting. My pulse spiked, and I dared not turn. I felt it closer, the presence behind me, moving but silent, watching. The path opened into a small clearing. Morning light filtered through the canopy, and for a moment relief washed over me. Nothing, just sunlight, just leaves, but relief was fragile. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and the silence wasn't empty. It had a weight, a texture, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then I saw it, a circle of stones, old, blackened, arranged in a pattern that made my skin crawl. In the center, the dirt was freshly turned, soft and dark. My heart pounded. Someone had been here, or something had. The prints led right to it, then stopped. I stepped closer, flashlight catching the edges of the stones. Symbols were carved into each one, twisting and jagged, almost alive in their shape. A whisper in my mind, barely perceptible. You shouldn't be here. I spun, looking for the path back, and it was gone. The trail I had followed vanished into the trees. The direction I had come from seemed different, wrong somehow, the forest rearranged. Panic clawed at me. I ran in the direction I thought was back, branches whipping my face, roots catching my feet. After what felt like forever, I stumbled into another clearing. The sun was lower now, though it shouldn't have moved so quickly. And there, standing at the edge of the trees, just beyond the light, was a figure, motionless, watching. Tall, impossibly thin, face obscured by shadow, eyes gleaming. I froze, my mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe a stranger, a hunter, but something about the figure was wrong, too still, too silent. The air around it seemed to pulse like the forest itself recognized it. My flashlight flickered, and when the beam steadied, the figure was closer. Not walking, not running, just closer. I turned to run, and the path I had come from reappeared. Twisted, warped, like it had been there all along but hiding from me. I sprinted, branches tearing at my clothes, roots tripping me, the presence behind me silent but relentless. Hours or maybe minutes later, I emerged from the forest. The town lights were faint in the distance, safe in their illusion of normalcy. I looked back. The path was gone, just forest, unbroken and still. I should have told someone, called the sheriff. But the memory of the stones, the figure, the whispers, it didn't feel like something anyone could believe. It didn't feel like something that wanted to be found. I keep thinking about it though. The trail that wasn't there before. The prints that didn't belong. The figure that waited. Something in the forest noticed me, remembered me. And I can't shake the feeling that it's still there, watching, waiting for the next time I wander too far. And maybe, just maybe, the forest will show the path again. And if it does, I don't know if I'll be ready. I found the journal the day after the farmer went missing. It wasn't hidden, not really. Just left on the kitchen table, open to a page halfway through. The handwriting was tight, hurried, almost trembling. The kind of writing that tells you fear has been living in someone's bones for weeks before it spills onto paper. The first entry I read was simple. Day after day, he wrote about the fields, the weather, the animals. Then one line caught my eye. I think I'm being watched. Something moves in the trees, always just beyond sight. The words made my skin crawl. I looked out the window at the line of oaks at the edge of his land. The wind stirred them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were holding something, waiting. The next entry was darker. He wrote about the whispers first. Not the wind, not the usual sounds of the farm, but actual whispers. They speak when the wind is right. They don't belong to any man or animal. They call my name, but it isn't me they want. I flipped pages faster, my heartbeat thumping in my ears. I knew I should have stopped reading. I should have put the journal down and walked away, but something kept me glued to it. The way the words trembled on the page, the way the sentences cut off mid-thought like he'd been interrupted, like something had been there, watching him. The entries grew more frantic. He described seeing shadows moving where there shouldn't be shadows, shapes sliding between the trees at the edge of the field. One morning he wrote about a figure standing near the barn, tall, thin, unmoving. He swore it wasn't human. It waits. It waits for me to leave the house. I can hear it even when I hide. I could almost hear it. I could almost feel it. I left the house that night, notebook in hand, just to see the field for myself. The wind carried the scent of damp soil and corn. I walked along the edges where the farmer had written the figure appeared. The moon was low, casting long shadows that twisted unnaturally, making ordinary trees look like things that should not exist. I paused. There it was, or rather something. A shift in the shadows, too deliberate to be natural. My fingers tightened around the journal. Every instinct told me to run, but my feet moved forward anyway. Step by step, I followed the edge of the trees. The shadows moved just a little ahead of me, staying out of reach, teasing me. The farmer had written about the whispers growing louder at night, forming words he couldn't understand. I thought it was madness, fear eating at a lonely man. But standing there in the cold night, I realized it was true. The wind carried voices that didn't belong. A faint hissing, soft and urgent, drifting through the branches. My skin prickled and the hairs on my arms stood straight. They know I'm here. The next morning, I tried to map the sightings, comparing them with his entries. Every description lined up perfectly. Every shape, every rustle, every whispered call. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't losing his mind. He had seen something, and it had taken him before he could understand what it wanted. I couldn't shake the sense that the journal itself was alive in a way, feeding on fear. Reading it made the shadows longer, made the whispers louder. I kept thinking of the last entry. Only 2 lines, smeared with something dark, almost like blood. They're close. The rest was gone, ripped out or burned away. I spent the next days watching the trees, following the paths he had drawn. I thought I could anticipate the shapes, predict the whispers, but they were always just beyond reach, always retreating, always watching. The wind would shift and suddenly the words would be clear. my name, sometimes laughing, sometimes warning. I began dreaming of the trees at night, dreams where the branches twisted into faces, the roots reaching for me like hands. And every morning the journal was there, waiting as if it had followed me home. I tried burning it, tried burying it. Each time it returned, open to the page where he'd written about the shadows that waited for him. Then one evening I found a note tucked between the pages, not in his handwriting, not in mine. Thin, precise letters almost carved into the paper. "You shouldn't be here, they will come." I dropped the journal. My hands shook. I thought about the farmer, alone out there, hearing the same whispers I could now feel in my own chest. I tried to tell someone, sheriff, neighbors, anyone, but the words came out jumbled, frantic, and no one understood. They looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was, but the trees, the shadows, they were real, and now they knew I knew. Last night I heard something moving just beyond my window. Soft steps, careful, deliberate. I didn't look. I couldn't. But I felt the gaze heavy pressing through the glass, through the walls. I knew what it wanted. I knew what the journal had been leading me toward. The entries kept playing in my mind. They called my name. I could hear it now, faintly, weaving through the branches outside. My own name, whispered and distorted, carried by the wind. And I realized the farmer hadn't run. He hadn't disappeared. He had been claimed, pulled into the forest that shouldn't exist, into the shadows that watched, into the whispers that remembered every step he had ever taken. I don't know how long I can last. Every night the voices grow louder, the shadows longer, and the journal waits, open, calling me back. I try to resist, try to stay inside the circle of my own house, but I feel it always at the edge of hearing, waiting for me to walk into the woods. I've started hearing my own name in the whispers, faint, distant, carried on the branches that scrape against my walls. And I know deep down that the path the farmer walked isn't done. The shadows haven't finished their hunt. They're patient. They've watched for years, and soon they'll come for me too. The last page I read tonight had a single line. "If you hear the whispers, do not follow them. Do not answer. They will take what they see in your eyes." I shut the journal, hands trembling, but I can still hear it. Soft, patient, insistent. My name. The shadows in the trees waiting, watching, always waiting. I noticed it the first time because I froze. Not on purpose, just something made me stop. The path ahead was empty, or it looked empty, but as soon as my feet stopped, I felt it. Like a weight pressing from the shadows between the trees, a presence that didn't belong. My chest tightened. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. But the rustling didn't stop, not the normal sound of leaves in the wind. This was deliberate, soft, calculated, waiting. I tried to keep moving, telling myself speed was safety. The forest was dense, but I remembered the farmer's journal, how he'd written about something watching him. I laughed at the memory. Not out loud, more like a bitter echo in my own head. But the laugh felt hollow. When I moved faster, the feeling receded. When I slowed, it pressed closer. There were no footprints, no broken branches, nothing to mark a trail, but the sensation of being observed grew heavier. I started testing it. A slow walk, then a stop, freeze. And every time the shadows seemed to tighten, like they were squeezing the air around me. My eyes darted from tree to tree, trying to find a shape, an outline, anything. But it was always just dark, always just beyond the edge of reason. By the third day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I set out with my flashlight, thinking light would help. It didn't. The beam cut through the night like a knife, but the darkness between the trees swallowed it whole. When I paused, I felt eyes, or something like eyes, tracing me. They didn't blink, didn't shift, just fixed, cold, empty, but knowing. I began marking the trees with chalk, counting steps, measuring distances, trying to find a pattern. Each pause was a test, each stop a trap. Something learned me faster than I could learn it. Once I stopped near a grove of birches. I thought I saw a figure, tall and thin, half hidden behind the trunks. I blinked and it wasn't there. But the feeling didn't leave. Not when I ran. Not when I sprinted home, my legs screaming, my lungs burning. Sleep became impossible. I dreamed of the trees moving toward me, always just out of reach. I woke with scratches on my arms that weren't there before, small, shallow, like fingernails or claws brushing my skin. And the whispers, always whispers, grew louder. My name carried on the wind, stretched and twisted. I tried to cover my ears, tried to tell myself it was wind, the way it shifts through dense leaves. But the sound didn't move with the trees. It moved with me, always when I stopped. I stopped leaving the house during the day. The shadows weren't strong then, I told myself. But at night, the path behind my home called. I could feel it, subtle vibrations under my feet. My heart would hammer, but my legs would freeze without warning. I realized it wasn't chasing me. It was following, patient, methodical, almost intelligent. One evening, I left a trail of lanterns behind me, thinking I could light my way and maybe trick it. I walked slowly, then paused. The lanterns flickered, the wind died, and I heard the sound. Soft, almost like breathing coming from between the trees. My head whipped around. Nothing, just shadows. But they felt alive, moving closer the longer I stared. The rustling was synchronized with my pulse. The moment I moved, it paused. The moment I stopped, it pressed in again. I thought about the farmer, about the entries in his journal. He had written about shapes that only appeared when he wasn't moving, figures that lingered in the dark, waiting. I had laughed at it then, a foolish, self-assured laugh. Now I knew better. There is something in the forest that defies the rules of sight and space, something that thrives on your hesitation, your curiosity, your fear. I started talking to myself while walking, forcing motion, breaking the silence. You're nothing, you can't see me, I'm moving. It was a feeble comfort. Each word echoed strangely, as if the trees themselves absorbed it, twisted it, and sent it back. I caught glimpses in my peripheral vision, tall shapes that disappeared when looked at directly. I tried not to stare. I tried not to stop. But the forest was endless, and exhaustion made it impossible to keep running forever. Then came the scratches in the journal. I had started carrying the farmer's journal with me like a talisman. I flipped through it while walking. One night, a new mark appeared, not there before, a jagged line across the page where it had been blank, almost like it had been scored by fingernails. The handwriting was not the farmer. It was jagged, chaotic, alien. I couldn't read it, but I felt the meaning. It had noticed me. I began leaving my own marks on trees. Symbols, scratches, hopping to establish territory to communicate in some way. It didn't help. The forest swallowed them, erased them, or maybe just ignored them. One night I stopped to catch my breath. The rustling didn't hesitate, my heart froze. From between the trees I felt the gaze, intense, patient, almost curious. I thought I saw a head tilt, the sense of awareness, the suggestion of form. And I ran, faster than ever before. The whispers became voices, though they were never human. Hissing syllables, soft but deliberate. Come, stop, look. My mind started filling in shapes, images I didn't want to imagine. Faces formed in the bark, mouths that weren't there, eyes that followed me even as I sprinted. I tripped once and the forest seemed to swallow me in the instant I hit the ground. When I scrambled to my feet, there was nothing. But I felt it, closer than ever. Watching, patient, waiting. I tried retracing the farmer's steps during the day, following his entries in the journal. Paths that should have led me to nothing instead led me to strange clearings, moss-covered stones, depressions in the earth that felt deliberate, unnatural. I thought about the shape that had followed me last night. It had stayed in the shadows, never revealing itself fully. I realized it didn't need to. Fear was enough. Awareness was enough. Hesitation was enough. One morning, I found a note pinned to a tree near the edge of the clearing. My handwriting, my words, I hadn't written it. It simply said, "You cannot outrun them. They wait for the pause." I stared at it, frozen, realizing I was reading my own fear reflected back at me. The forest wasn't just observing, it was learning. I began timing my stops, forcing myself to keep moving, but it adapted. The shadows between the trees now moved with me, shifting subtly, keeping pace. When I glanced sideways, I thought I caught movement in shapes that shouldn't exist. Elongated limbs, impossible angles, faces that didn't belong to any human or animal. They weren't running. They weren't chasing. They were walking alongside between the spaces in silence, waiting for me to falter. The night I finally understood, I stopped at the edge of the clearing and forced myself to stand perfectly still. The shadows pooled around me, pressing into the air, brushing my skin without touch. The whispers circled me, repeating my name over and over. And then from between the trees I saw it, a figure taller than any man, darker than the night, impossibly still. Its head tilted toward me, and for a second I felt it see everything inside me. Every fear, every hesitation, every weakness. And I realized the forest doesn't need to kill. It only needs you to stop, to notice, to give it your fear. I ran then, not away from it, but into the unknown trails, letting exhaustion guide me through unmarked paths. I can still hear it even now in the quiet corners of my home. I can hear it when I pause, when I hesitate. Always watching, always patient, waiting for the moment I stop. And I know I will never be able to stop again. I keep the journal close. I keep moving, because if I ever stop, I will finally see what's really waiting from between the trees. The neon sign buzzed like it was warning me, not welcoming. I shouldn't have stopped. I knew that the second I turned off the highway and saw the cracked asphalt leading to the faded beige building. The motel crest. One flickering bulb over the office door. No cars. No people. Just the hum of electricity and the smell of damp paint. I pushed the door open. The bell tinkled, more out of habit than sound, and the lobby was empty. A layer of dust coated the counter, and the papers behind it were yellowed, curling at the edges. A single chair sat awkwardly in the middle of the room, its fabric stained, spring sticking through. I called out. No answer. Only the soft hum of the fluorescent light overhead. My footsteps echoed. Then I heard it, the faintest shuffle from the back office. A man appeared. Sheriff-looking type, but his uniform didn't sit right. Too clean, too pressed. His eyes didn't blink naturally, just observed, calculating. "Room," he said, his voice hollow, carrying the echo of the empty motel. I nodded, fumbling with my wallet. He handed me a key. Metal, heavy, cold. Room 7. He didn't smile, didn't look away. Just tilted his head like he was studying me, measuring how I reacted. Something about him made my skin crawl, but I forced a smile. I thanked him, trying to ignore the way his gaze lingered as I walked to the door. The hallway was dim. Carpet smelled of mildew and cheap air freshener. My footsteps sounded louder than they should have. The walls stretched unnaturally long, or maybe it was just me. Room 7. The key turned in the lock with a sharp click that seemed to echo farther than it should. Inside, the air was stale. The bedspread was faded, the pillow lumpy. The TV sat silently, screen dark. A single lamp flickered once, then steadied. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart didn't settle. The room felt watched. I told myself it was just nerves, the isolation. But then I noticed the shadows along the corners of the ceiling, shifting even though nothing moved. I unpacked slowly, every sound amplified, the zipper, the thud of my boots against the carpet. Then I heard it, a faint knock. Not at the door, not even on the walls. Somewhere between the floorboards and the ceiling. I froze. Silence followed. I told myself it was the building settling, but the sound repeated, soft, deliberate. Pause, tap, tap, pause. I tried the TV. Nothing. Static, then dead. I checked my phone. No signal, no reception at all. Even the clock blinked 12:00, though I knew it wasn't midnight yet. I sank into the chair by the window, staring out at the black asphalt, the empty parking lot. The neon sign buzzed, dimly illuminating the faded paint, casting long, jagged shadows across the lot. Then I heard footsteps from the hallway outside. Slow, measured, deliberate, not fast like someone running, not hesitant like someone searching, just walking, stopped, pause, continue. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. They didn't approach my door, just moved past. Shadows stretched along the walls with each step. Then silence. I opened the door cautiously. Empty hallway, no footprints. Carpet undisturbed, only the hum of the flickering light. I stepped out. Hallway stretched into darkness, endless. My own breathing loud. I checked each door. Room after room, empty. Nothing. Yet that sense of being watched didn't leave. I could feel it from behind the walls, in the shadows at the far end of the hall. Back in my room, I locked the door, though I knew it wouldn't stop anything. I unpacked just a little, left my bag in the corner. Then I noticed the faintest detail. The mirror. Mounted crooked, edges chipped, I saw my reflection, but not just mine. A shadow lingered behind me, darker than the room itself. I spun, empty, heart pounding. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. I didn't move for a long time, eyes glued to the mirror, waiting for it to show again. Sleep didn't come. I tried, eyes heavy, but every sound, the hum of the fluorescent light, the faint buzz from the neon sign outside, the settling of the old building, kept me alert. Then the knock came again. Soft, tap, tap, right on the door this time. I froze, breath shallow. Nobody outside, just the emptiness of the motel. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing, but the knock had weight. It was deliberate, intentional. I considered leaving, but the night was dark, the highway empty, and the thought of stepping outside felt worse than staying inside. I checked the window. Blackness. The parking lot empty. Not a single car, not a sound, just the motel and the neon sign flickering. Then I saw it through the glass. A movement, maybe a trick of the light. Something crouched low just beyond the edge of the asphalt. I blinked. Nothing, heart racing. I pressed back from the window. The room seemed smaller now, walls closer, shadows stretching. I realized then that the motel wasn't just empty. It was waiting, watching, breathing with me. I tried the key again, thinking I could leave, but the lock clicked strangely, slower than usual. When I turned it, the door didn't open fully. Resistance. Something holding it from the other side. I backed away. The shadow in the mirror flickered again. I wasn't imagining it. Not anymore. I sat on the bed, clutching the key, staring at the door. Each creak of the old building, each hum of the neon, each flicker of the light made my stomach tight. The silence became oppressive, heavy. I could almost hear breathing, shallow and deliberate, just beyond my ears. The motel itself felt alive, aware of me. I could feel it learning my patterns, timing my movements. Then came the whisper, low, almost under my breath, carrying through the room. Not from the hallway, not the window, from everywhere. Stay, don't leave. I froze, I couldn't move. My own voice caught in my throat. The shadow in the mirror shifted, closer, taller, watching, waiting. I spent the night sitting upright, eyes fixed on the door, heart hammering. Every small sound, tap of the radiator, rustle of the sheets, creak of the floorboards, was amplified. I could hear the air in the room settling, the static in the light, the building itself breathing around me. By dawn, I was exhausted. The neon flickered out with the morning light. The shadow receded almost reluctantly. The motel looked empty, lifeless, harmless. I considered leaving, but I knew better. Something in that place was patient, intelligent. It waited for hesitation, for fear, for the moment I let my guard down. I left the key on the counter when I checked out. The sheriff, him again, didn't smile, didn't blink naturally, just nodded. As I drove away, the motel shrank in the rearview mirror, ordinary and innocuous. But I could feel it watching, following me in ways I couldn't see. The path ahead seemed clear, but I knew one thing. I would never forget the motel that no one recommends. And if I ever stopped, it would find me. The hallway smelled of mildew and something else, metallic, old, almost like rusted blood. I knew it shouldn't bother me. Motel rooms sit empty all the time. But something about room 6 made the air thicker, heavier, like I was breathing through water. The carpet outside the door was worn, threadbare in places, but clean. No footprints, no signs anyone had been here. Officially empty, the papers in the office said, but my gut screamed otherwise. I tried the knob. Locked. Not unusual, but the key in my pocket, the one the sheriff had handed me for another room, turned halfway, resistance, then nothing. It wouldn't open. My fingers lingered on the cold metal. I could feel the weight of the room, even from the outside. It felt alive, expectant, like it had been waiting. I stepped back. The hall lights flickered. Shadows pooled around the corners, twisting just slightly, almost like they were breathing with me. I hadn't seen a soul all day, yet I could feel eyes. Watching, patient. I swallowed hard and took a deep breath. Room 6. Why does that number matter more than the others? I didn't know, not yet. The first sound was subtle, almost polite. A shuffling inside. Carpet moving, soft, deliberate. My heartbeat sped up. I leaned closer to the door, straining, but the hall stayed empty. No signs anyone had entered or left. The sound stopped. Then a whisper. Not words, just a breathy exhale. closer to my ear than it should have been. I spun. Empty hallway. I told myself it was imagination, nerves fraying after nights alone on the road. But the room had a smell, faint, musty, old. Something I remembered from childhood, hiding under the bed, the attic, the cellar. The scent of secrets. I reached out, hand trembling, and pressed my ear to the door. Voices, low murmuring, multiple, not language I recognized. Just tones, cadence, a rhythm that made my stomach tighten. The carpet beneath me seemed to pulse. The walls shivered, faint vibrations under my fingertips. I pulled back, breathing shallow, mind racing. The sheriff's words earlier, something about "some rooms are better left closed," came back to me. I'd laughed. Now I wasn't so sure. I leaned against the opposite wall, trying to shake it off. The hallway stretched endlessly, longer than it should have. Each flicker of the fluorescent lights revealed nothing, then a blur. A shape at the far end. Watching, standing just at the threshold of shadow and light. I squinted. Gone. My pulse raced. I hadn't moved, couldn't move. Then I saw the doorknob slowly turn. Not from my touch. Not from any hand I could see. It clicked and the latch shifted. The door remained closed. My legs refused to carry me. I sank to the floor, back pressed against the wall, eyes fixed. Room 6 waited, silent, patient. Hours passed. I didn't know how long. The murmurs inside stayed quiet, almost teasing, just out of hearing. Shadows shifted in impossible ways along the hall. I counted them, walls, corners, but numbers didn't add up. One corner seemed to stretch farther than physics allowed. Another seemed hollow, yet the shadow moved within it, self-contained. I tried the office, thinking maybe I could ask the sheriff. Maybe he would explain. Empty. Papers stacked neatly like no one had been there in years. The key rack hung empty except for my key. No other staff. The phone dead. Even the neon sign outside hummed quietly, ominously cheerful, flickering in the first light of evening. I went back to room 6. Knelt, pressed my ear to the door again. Murmurs. This time words, or something like words, slipped through. Not understandable, but urgent, like someone or something was trying to get out. Or in, I didn't know. I reached for the doorknob. Cold, metallic, impossible smooth. A breath of air pressed against my face. I flinched. Nothing visible. I found a small gap beneath the door, the paint chipped. I pressed my eye close. Darkness inside. Deeper than the room should be. The floor, the walls, something wrong with the proportions. It was bigger than the motel plans. I could feel it, like stepping into water deeper than I could see. Something waited in there. I could feel its gaze press against my soul. The whispers changed. Higher pitched, frantic. I could make out shapes behind the darkness, figures maybe, or illusions my mind conjured. They moved, flowing against walls that should have been solid. Eyes, glinting faintly, reflected some light I couldn't place. Watching, always watching. I backed away, heart hammering. The hallway shifted, slightly, subtly. The lights now above me flickered in patterns I couldn't follow. One moment long, one short. The shadows danced. Shapes appeared at corners, then dissolved. The room itself seemed aware of me. Breathing, waiting, hunger, anticipation. I thought of the sheriff again. That nod, that wordless warning. The way he didn't blink properly. Maybe it wasn't just the room. Maybe it was him. The motel. The empty hallway. Something was anchored here, feeding off the presence of anyone foolish enough to come. And I had come. I ran my hands along the wall, trying to orient myself. Every surface seemed wrong. Smooth in some areas, rough in others, the texture inconsistent. Time distorted. I knew it should be seconds, minutes, but it felt like hours. The whispers rose, closer now, circling, almost impatient. Then the doorknob rattled violently. Not a gentle turn. The door shook as if pushed by an invisible force. The air thickened, my breath caught. I stepped back, footing uncertain. The shadow in the corner elongated, stretching along the wall, crawling toward me without moving. Eyes glinting, watching, waiting. I remembered the room numbers. 1 through 10, they should be mundane. But room 6, it had never checked out, never emptied. Official records claimed it vacant, but the history whispered differently. Guests who stayed never left, and now I knew why. I sank against the wall, clutching my bag. My hands shook. Sweat ran down my spine. The room called to me, not with words but sensation. A pull, a weight, an irresistible pressure that made my limbs heavy. It didn't want to trap me, not immediately. It wanted acknowledgement, recognition, fear, submission. I didn't stay. I left the key on the counter, shuffled to the car, and didn't look back. The road stretched dark before me. The neon sign buzzed faintly behind, fading into distance, but I could feel it still, watching, patient, waiting, and I knew someday some traveler would check in, and room 6 would remember. And I would never forget. The key was cold in my palm, again. I just checked my bag, my pockets, even the seat of the car, every place it shouldn't have been, and there it was, room 6. Same number, same worn metal, same chill that crawled into my bones. I dropped it once, thinking it had fallen from my hand. It clinked on the floor, hit the tiles, and somehow when I looked back, it was back in my pocket. I should have left. I should have tossed it, thrown it into the desert beyond the motel. But some part of me needed to see, needed to understand why a piece of metal could feel so alive. The hall was quiet. The air smelled of mildew, dust, and that metallic tang again, the kind that makes the back of your throat dry. My footsteps echoed, too loud, too deliberate. I wanted to convince myself this was paranoia. But as I walked past the other rooms, I realized something. No matter how many times I glanced, no one ever checked out. Room 6 had always been empty, yet full, a paradox I couldn't explain. I knelt to inspect the key again. Tiny scratches along the edge, faint, almost like symbols. I didn't understand them. My fingers traced the grooves, the chill biting harder than before. A whisper came from the room, just barely audible, like the wind, like fabric brushing against itself. But it wasn't wind. It wasn't fabric. I knew that now. I debated leaving. Every instinct screamed to run. And yet my hand tightened around the key. Step by step, I approached the door. Room 6 waited, patient, silent but alive in a way that made the air vibrate around me. The doorknob shook slightly under my touch, as if testing me, gauging my intent. I pressed the key into the lock. It turned slowly, resisting, then slid home. The latch clicked, soft, deliberate. The room smelled of decay and time itself, of things long forgotten. Shadows moved along the edges, pooling in corners that shouldn't exist. The room was bigger than the motel, or maybe it had always been infinite. My mind struggled to measure it, measure anything. I stepped in. The key fell to the floor. I reached, expecting it to stay. It bounced, rolled, and somehow ended up back in my pocket. Heart hammering, I backed toward the bed. The furniture was normal, old, but the air vibrated with expectation, with awareness. Like it knew I was here, like it was waiting. Then I heard it, a soft scraping behind the dresser. I froze, my own breath loud in the silence. A shadow slithered, too fluid to be natural. Something moved without sound, without mass. Eyes glimmered just for a moment, then gone. The whispers rose again, incoherent, urgent, like an argument I couldn't follow. I realized the key wasn't the door. It wasn't even the room. It was me. It had found me. I wanted to run. I wanted to shake the key free. But my hands moved on their own, pulling it out again, pressing it against the lock, hearing it click in time with my heartbeat. Every turn unlocked more than metal. It unlocked memory, awareness, fear. A presence in the room, unseen but undeniable, stirred. The shadows lengthened, thickened, wrapping corners and ceilings, pressing the walls outward. I touched the dresser, cold, smooth, wrong. There was a dent beneath the drawer that hadn't been there before, small, perfect, like a hiding place. I crouched, peering in. Nothing. Yet the air shifted, charged, as though the room was exhaling. The key moved again, back in my pocket. My hands shook, but I didn't drop it. Something in me wanted it to come back. Something in me wanted it to choose me. A sudden sound, metal scraping tile, made me whip around. The bed had shifted just a fraction. Impossible, I knew it had. And beneath the bed, a pair of eyes reflecting something that shouldn't exist watched. They blinked in unison, then vanished. I blinked, tried to convince myself it was a trick of light. But the key vibrated in my pocket, alive. I ran my hands along the walls trying to find the exit, the normal door, anything solid. The hallway outside seemed to stretch, longer than it should have. Room numbers blurred, merging, skipping. 6 came up over and over as if the motel itself had become room 6. I could feel it, drawing me, claiming me. I bent down again, forced my hands into my pockets. The key was there, waiting. I pulled it out. It pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. And then I understood in a terrifying clarity it wasn't just a key, it was a tether, a lure. Every time it returned, it was pulling me back. Not the room, not the motel, something else. Something patient, calculating, alive. I pressed it again into the lock, ignoring the scream in my mind. The door opened wider than physics should allow. Shadows stretched into corridors that didn't exist. I could see walls fold, ceilings sink, floor ripple. My reflection, somewhere between the mirror and the wallpaper, looked back at me. Wrong, not me. Something older, waiting, smiling behind my eyes. I stumbled backward away from the door, tried to drop the key, tried to throw it. It clinked once on the floor, then slid impossibly back into my palm. The whispers crescendoed into voices I almost recognized, memories not mine, stories I hadn't lived, guests who had checked in, guests who had left or never left. Room 6 had claimed them. The key had delivered them. And now me. I bolted for the hallway, the motel stretching impossibly long. Room 6 stayed open behind me, breathing, waiting, calling. The key pressed cold and unyielding into my pocket. I knew deep down it wouldn't let me go. No matter how far I ran, no matter how many doors I tried. By morning, I was back in my car, engine running. The road stretched empty before me, sunlight faint, almost reluctant. I dared a glance at my hand, the key, back in my pocket, shiny, cold, patient, waiting for me. I drove. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I knew the key would find its way back again, eventually, like it always did, and I didn't know if I would ever be ready when it did. But room 6 was patient, and so was the key. I noticed it first in the lobby, behind the counter, buried in a dusty binder with a faded label, guest records 1973 to present. The pages were yellowed, brittle, but my name was there, written neatly like it had always been meant to be. Kashif Rashid, it said. Check-in date, July 12, 1973. Checkout, blank. No signature, no note, just a line eternally unfinished. I froze, the pen in my hand trembling. The clerk, if you could even call him that, was nowhere to be seen. Just the hum of the old fluorescent light and the faint smell of mildew. I traced my finger down the page, over the ink, over the years that weren't mine. How could this be? I hadn't been born in '73. I hadn't even been alive. And yet, my name stared back at me like a prophecy. The hallway outside my room felt different. I could feel the walls pressing closer, the ceiling lower than I remembered. Room numbers flickered under the dull lights. For 5-6, my room, my past, my future. Room 6, always room 6. I pulled the binder closer, opened it again, and realized every entry after mine was a repetition of the same name, dates shifting, years stretching impossibly long. Every check-in after mine was just me, over and over, listed as a guest who never left. I ran my hands along the walls, trying to convince myself this was a trick, a clerical error, some old prank left behind by the previous manager. But the air shifted, heavy and wet, like a storm trapped inside the building. The smell of mildew sharpened into something iron-like, coppery, flowing into my nose and settling in my chest. My heart began to thump with a rhythm that didn't feel like mine. Then I noticed the door, my door, room 6. It had always been closed, but now somehow it looked different. The edges blurred, like it was both there and not there. I lifted my hand. The knob turned under my fingers as if expecting me. The key, my key, had returned again, cold and heavy in my palm. The first step inside was impossible to describe. The room had changed. Furniture I remembered was rearranged. The bed was higher, the dresser older, darker. Shadows pooled in corners, thick and patient. A soft whisper came from the window, brushing against my ears like wind, though the blinds were drawn tight. "You've always been here," it said. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It settled inside me, coiling around my ribs, tightening. I turned slowly. The mirror on the wall caught my reflection, but it wasn't me. Not exactly. My eyes, my face were right, but the skin wrong, tired in ways that centuries alone could produce. I leaned closer, almost expecting it to move on its own, and it did. My reflection smiled when I didn't. My reflection knew things I didn't. Things the key had promised me long before I ever found it. I backed toward the bed, fumbling with the key in my pocket. It hummed, almost alive, as if it could sense my panic. A drawer squeaked open on its own. I froze. Inside, stacks of papers, letters, and photos, old photos, some grainy, some impossibly clear. And in every single one, me. Sitting, standing, checking in, checking out, never leaving. I held a coffee cup in one, reading a newspaper in another. Some photos were dated decades before my birth. All of them had the same room number scrawled on the back, 6. I tried to leave. My feet moved toward the door, but the hallway stretched impossibly long. Every step forward felt heavier, as though the motel itself resisted me. Behind me, the whispers rose into a chorus. You were never a guest. You belong here. You belong here. The repetition was maddening, hypnotic, binding. I turned, expecting something, someone, anything. Nothing. And yet, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down. I sat on the bed, shoving the key into my pocket, trying to ground myself. Tried to think of my life outside these walls. My friends, my apartment, my car. But memories blurred. Faces I knew became distorted, unfamiliar. And the more I struggled to remember, the less my past seemed my own. Every thought, every memory felt borrowed. Room 6 was claiming ownership, page by page, year by year. A sound drew me to the corner of the room, a soft dragging like fabric across tile. I followed it. Behind the closet door, shadows shifted unnaturally. My reflection in the polished floor moved on its own, packing, restless. Then, in a whisper just behind my ear, a question. Do you remember checking in? I flinched. My own voice, or a version of it, answered, trembling. I don't. The key vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, examining it under the faint light. The scratches were deeper now, symbols more pronounced, almost readable. And I understood in a way that terrified me that it was not just a key to the room. It was a key to time, to my existence, to every instance where I had arrived and never left. Each turn, each return bound me tighter. I thought of leaving again, really leaving this time. But the door, room 6, had changed. The knob resisted, the hinges groaned, and the corridor beyond twisted into a pattern I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just the hallway anymore. It was a corridor through my own existence. Every choice, every step I thought I'd made outside this motel, folded back here, layered like paper in a book I could no longer close. I sank to the floor, breathing shallow. The whispers continued, soft, patient. They weren't outside. They were inside me, inside the room, inside the key. They spoke of time loops, of doors that never closed, of guests who had checked in centuries ago and were still present. The binder, the photos, the whispers, they all pointed to one truth I could no longer deny. I had never been a guest, not really, not ever. Room 6 had been waiting for me, and now I was here, permanently. The key, warm against my palm now, pulsed as if in response. My reflection leaned forward from the mirror, lips parting in a silent smile. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear the key apart. But I knew deep down that the key would return, that room 6 would always be patient, that I had never and would never truly leave. Outside, the night shifted. The motel lights flickered faintly, indifferent. I pressed the key to my chest, feeling its cold certainty. Somewhere in the walls, the whispers gathered, and I realized I wasn't alone. Never alone, never had been. And then from the dark corner of the room, a shadow moved. Small, almost imperceptible, yet deliberate. Watching, waiting. For the next turn, the next check-in, the next moment I thought I could escape. I didn't move, I couldn't. I only held the key and waited. The motel was patient, I was not, but I would learn to be. And room 6 would always be ready. I first noticed it in the diner across from the motel. The walls were lined with faded yellow posters, each promising a reward for the safe return of someone missing. Faces stared back at me, eyes wide, mouths frozen in mid-smile or mid-scream. But as I sipped my coffee, a flicker of movement caught my eye. One of the faces, small, a boy maybe 10, blurred at the edges like ink dissolving in water. I blinked. He was still there, but his features were softening, fading, melting into the paper itself. I shook my head. Maybe it was the light, the flickering fluorescent overhead, but the sensation lingered, a cold whisper brushing across my skin. I walked closer, touching the edge of the poster. The paper felt brittle, older than it should. The boy's eyes, once sharp, pleading, had become pale smudges. I stepped back. My pulse picked up. It shouldn't be possible. Faces don't vanish from photographs. The waitress noticed me staring. "Crazy, isn't it?" she said, voice low, almost conspiratorial. She had a face lined by years I didn't want to count. "They disappear, not all at once, just little by little." She laughed softly, but her eyes were wary. "You're new. Don't touch the posters too long. You might see things you don't want to." I didn't understand. How could faces slowly fade? How could a memory, preserved in paper and ink, simply unravel before my eyes? I tried to focus on one poster, tracing the outline of a woman's mouth. Each second it blurred more until it was nothing but pale smears. I felt a strange vertigo, like the room itself had tilted slightly. And then I noticed the shadows in the corner, long and thin, stretching toward the posters, whispering something I couldn't hear. Leaving the diner, I walked back toward the motel. The street lamps flickered in half-light, throwing odd angles across the pavement. Something followed me, I was sure of it. A figure, or maybe just a trick of the light, but every time I slowed, it stepped closer. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Yet when I looked back ahead, the shadow was there, longer than it should be, hunched, waiting. Inside the motel lobby, the air smelled of old paper and dust. Posters lined the wall, framed, laminated, fading silently. I reached for one, the edges curling under my fingers. A handprint appeared, smudged and wet, though I had only brushed the surface. My breath caught. The face on that poster, a teenage girl, was almost gone now, her eyes nothing but pale cavities. I stumbled back, hearing a faint whisper. "They always fade." I tried to leave, but the door to the outside corridor felt wrong. It resisted me, like the building itself was breathing, alive and patient. I glanced around. Every corner of the motel seemed to shift subtly when I wasn't looking directly at it. Hallway walls stretched, doors warped. Room numbers flickered like dying lights. 1236, my pulse raced. Room 6, the one that didn't officially exist, seemed closer than ever. I went back to the posters, compelled. Faces continued to dissolve. Small children, young men, older women, all melting into pale nothingness. And then I saw something I couldn't explain. In one poster, the woman's face reformed for a heartbeat, her eyes locking on mine, pleading. Then gone. I blinked. I hadn't moved. Had it moved? Or had it always been watching, waiting for me to notice? A folder sat beneath the posters, heavy and leather-bound. I opened it. Inside were photographs matching the posters, but now each had dates scribbled next to them. Dates that didn't make sense. Some were decades old, some were in the future, some were my own birth year. My heart thudded. One photo, a young boy, his face completely blank, was labeled, found at room 6. I froze. Room 6. That number again. My hands shook as I closed the folder, but the papers seemed to resist, curling against my grip, folding themselves neatly back into place. I felt it then, a presence behind me. I turned, empty corridor. But the whispering came again, just behind my ear. "They fade, and so will you." I spun, scanning the lobby, the walls, the ceiling. Nothing. Only the posters, pale, silent, slowly erasing lives from the world. I could hear my own breathing, shallow, uneven. My shadow stretched long across the floor, distorted, moving almost independently. The clock above the desk ticked too fast, each second echoing like gunshots. I realized something. Each poster, each face, each missing person was a marker, a record. And if I stayed too long, maybe I'd become one too. I wanted to step away, leave the diner, the motel, the entire street behind. But my feet didn't move. They were glued to the floor, drawn forward by curiosity and terror alike. I studied another poster. The edges of the photograph seemed to dissolve first, then the details. Hairline, eyes, mouth, all smearing into pale paper. And then, impossibly, the room itself reflected her face back at me. For a heartbeat, I saw myself, but not as I am now. Younger, thinner, somehow unfamiliar. The boy in the poster, or was it me, stared with wide, frightened eyes. The whispering grew louder, a chorus I couldn't silence. They fade, you fade. I stumbled to the wall, pressing my hand against it. Cold, solid. But the feeling didn't anchor me. The posters seemed to ripple in response, faces stretching, twisting, turning toward me. One moment a woman's mouth was a soft line. The next it twisted into a grimace, almost mocking. The hallway seemed endless now, stretching behind me, the walls bending outward. And from the shadows, a tiny, impossible movement. A small figure just beyond sight, always retreating when I looked directly. I took a step back. My own reflection in the glass frame stared at me, but it wasn't mine alone. Behind me, in the polished surface, I saw faint silhouettes, each matching a poster on the wall. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. The faces were tethered to the room, tethered to the fatting posters, tethered to the motel itself. And maybe I was tethered too. The diner door rattled. The street beyond was empty. But the whispering followed me, now inside my own skull, insistent, patient. I understood then that this place, these posters, the fatting faces, they were warnings, records, doors to something I could not yet name. And if I stayed too long, if I looked too closely, I could fade too. I backed into a corner, heart hammering, key sweating in my pocket. The posters were still fatting. The faces dissolving, returning, dissolving again. And in the movement of their disappearance, I glimpsed something terrifying. The next face to fade could be mine. A soft, cold breath grazed my ear. Room 6, it whispered. I spun, empty corridor, but I could feel it, waiting, watching, patient. And then the diner, the posters, the motel, all of it seemed to pulse, breathe. And I realized I was not a visitor. I was part of it. I had always been part of it. And room 6 was waiting. The posters faded. I stayed. The motel watched. I noticed him first across the street, sitting in the half-shadow of a broken lamppost. He was hunched over a small notebook, pencil moving quickly, erratically, as if the words were burning onto the page. His coat was too long, frayed at the cuffs, and the brim of his hat shadowed everything but the outline of his nose. Something about him set my teeth on edge. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. He was precise, obsessed, and I could feel it across the distance. The motel felt emptier that night than usual. Even the hum of the flickering neon sign outside seemed quieter, swallowed by the wind. I passed the diner, saw the waitress wiping down tables with a rag that had seen better days. Her eyes followed me, cautious, warning. I didn't notice the man at first, but when I did, he was closer, stepping lightly, slipping between shadows like a thought I couldn't pin down. I checked into the motel, carrying that same uneasy weight in my chest. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and old varnish. Room numbers glowed faintly under the sickly fluorescent light. I felt eyes on me, his eyes, somewhere behind the walls, watching, recording. I hadn't seen him enter, and yet I felt him there, always just beyond the reach of vision. I tried to ignore him, tried to tell myself I was imagining things, but then I found his notebook. It was on the floor outside my door, tucked just out of reach, as if he dropped it intentionally. My hands shook when I picked it up. Inside, the pages were filled with meticulous notes, names, dates, descriptions. Every missing person from the posters I'd seen. Every detail I didn't even know I noticed. And then there it was, my own name. Written in careful, tiny letters, the date scrawled beside it. My stomach twisted. I had been here for less than a day. How could he know? How could anyone know so much? Each line of his handwriting pulsed with a strange devotion, a hunger for detail that made the room itself seem smaller, tighter. My reflection in the hallway mirror flickered, and I almost dropped the notebook. For a moment I thought I saw him, or someone like him, staring from the other side, eyes bright, unblinking. But the glass was empty. Only my own terror stared back. That night I couldn't sleep. The corridors of the motel whispered with drafts I didn't remember. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him moving between rooms, between floors, leaving his notebooks behind, always documenting. The scratching of pencil on paper echoed in my head, a rhythm that became unbearable. And then I realized he wasn't just recording the missing, he was predicting them. The next morning, I found the notebook again, resting on the bed. I hadn't touched it. The pages had turned on their own, and now a new entry was there. Room 6. Watch the light, watch the shadow, they arrive. I couldn't read it without feeling my pulse hammer in my ears. Room 6. That number again. The room no one officially occupied. Was he watching me, or was I already part of this record? I tried to confront him, but the hallways were empty. The man was gone, vanished into the shadows as if he had never been there. Only his notebook remained, the pencil lying next to it, sharpened and ready. I flipped through the pages. Some sketches were crude, figures with hollow eyes, elongated limbs, faces blurred beyond recognition. Others were terrifyingly precise. Every detail of a person's life before they disappeared. And at the bottom of one page, a note in perfect, small handwriting. You watch. They watch, I record. I walked outside, desperate for sunlight, for any sign of the world being real, tangible, safe. But he was there again. Across the street, standing still, notebook open, pencil moving. And I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Every person who had passed him that morning, every dog, every car, every shadow, they seemed to bend toward him as if drawn by his obsession. He wasn't just documenting, he was pulling. Back inside, I couldn't focus. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the neon, the whistle of wind through broken window frames, felt like part of his documentation, a record of my panic. I could hear it, almost like the pencil scratching against paper, and I realized I was reading the wrong notebook. There was another tucked beneath the bed, and this one had my handwriting. Not mine exactly, but mine. Descriptions, notes, details I didn't remember writing. They arrive at night. Watch. Do not sleep. I slammed the notebook shut. The room went silent, almost too silent. And then I heard it, the faintest scratching like pencil on paper coming from somewhere I couldn't locate. My heart thudded, but I couldn't move. I knew if I did, I'd see him, or worse, see what he had already recorded about me. Every instinct told me to leave, to run. But my feet were rooted. I was part of this, whether I liked it or not. The day passed, slow, heavy. Every time I glanced out the window, he was gone. But the notebooks remained. On the bed, on the dresser, on the floor. Pages filled themselves while I wasn't looking. And every entry felt like a countdown. My name, my room, my actions. I was being tracked not just physically, but in some deeper, more impossible way. My thoughts, my fears, my mistakes, they were all being recorded. That night the whispers began again. Not from the hallway, not from the walls, but from the notebooks themselves. Tiny voices, scratching, muttering, echoing my own thoughts back at me. They come, they arrive, you cannot hide. I wanted to burn the notebooks, to destroy them, but I couldn't. They resisted. The fire bent around them, leaving the pages intact. And in the glow of the flames, I saw him again, through the window, notebook in hand, pencil moving, smiling at nothing and everything at once. I began to understand. He wasn't human, or if he was, he had become something else. Something tethered to the disappearances, to the fatting faces, to the rooms and walls themselves. He existed to record, and recording had made him eternal, patient, omnipresent. And now, I was part of his record. My every movement, my every thought, feeding the pages that multiplied around me. I tried to leave, to run, but the hallways twisted, endless and unfamiliar. The floorboards groaned, guiding me back to the center of the motel. And there in the flickering light, the man waited, pencil poised. He didn't need to speak. I could hear him in my mind. Watch, record, you are next. I fell to my knees, heart pounding, realizing I could no longer tell where I ended and his record began. Every action, every breath, every fleeting thought, already noted, already observed. I could feel the weight of centuries of observation pressing down. And in that moment I understood. He would never leave, and neither would I. The notebooks surrounded me, each one a pulse, a heartbeat, a record of lives unraveling. And from the shadows the man watched, always patiently documenting, smiling at the rhythm of disappearance. And somewhere, deep in the empty corridors of the motel. I knew the next page was already written. I first noticed it in the quiet hours when the motel lights flickered and the hum of the fridge felt louder than usual. There was a rhythm in the air, a pulse I couldn't ignore. Something about the way the posters in the hallway leaned just slightly to the left, the way the cracks in the ceiling ran across the room. They weren't random. They were following me. I tried to dismiss it at first, blamed it on exhaustion, too many nights on the road. But the feeling didn't go away. It followed me like a shadow, one I couldn't shake even when the hallway was empty. I kept hearing the faint shuffle of footsteps, a slow, deliberate packing that stopped whenever I moved. I froze once, thinking maybe I imagined it. But then I realized it was waiting for me to stop. I started keeping a notebook, a simple one, cheap, with a worn leather cover. I wrote down every disappearance I could find in the local papers, every name, every date, every location. And the pattern hit me like a punch I couldn't breathe from. Each person vanished along the same thread. The roadside motel, the town's outskirts, the old diner, the forest beyond the highway. And now it was me. I replayed every step I'd taken that week. The gas station at the edge of town, the diner with the cracked neon sign, the twisted trees on the road back here. Every victim had walked this path, every single one, and I had too without knowing it. The notebook grew heavier in my hand, each page crowded with scribbles, arrows, connections. Names circled and crossed out, faces I'd studied over and over. And yet, no matter how much I wrote, I could feel the unseen eyes pressing closer. Not just outside my window, not just in the hallway. Inside me, in my chest, my stomach, behind my eyes. A presence that mirrored every thought I tried to keep private. I remembered the first poster I had seen in the lobby. A young man, smiling too hard, his eyes wide and blank. The paper had curled at the edges, the ink smudged. I stared at it and felt a pull like a string wrapped around my wrist. I tore it down, took it to my room. But the next morning it was back in the same frame, the same smudge, the same hollow stare. I started tracing the steps of the others. Each victim had lingered in the same spaces I had, paused at the same corners, touched the same surfaces. Each of them had hesitated in the same way before moving forward. And I remembered it, the hesitation, that sudden pause at the door to room 6, my hand hovering over the handle. I thought I was just tired, but the pattern was clear. I wasn't making choices. I was following directions written somewhere I couldn't see. I checked the records at the town hall, trying to find a break in the logic, a name that didn't fit. But they all fit. Dates, places, connections. And at the bottom of the list, almost like an afterthought, my own name. Not under current residents, not under guests. Just there in the ledger with the same faded ink, the same handwriting as the others. I had registered long ago and never left. It was a small detail at first. A key left on the dresser, the same one I had returned to my pocket countless times. A photo torn from a newspaper slipping from under the bed. The air smelling faintly of someone else, someone I had never met. But each detail built on the last, a weight pressing on my chest, pushing the world into focus. I was part of it, part of the rhythm I had been trying to observe from a distance. But there was no distance anymore. I wandered the motel, notebook in hand, tracing the path of others, hopping to find an exit. The carpet beneath my feet had patterns that seemed to shift when I blinked. The cracks in the walls formed letters sometimes, barely visible, only for a moment, like a secret whispered in a language I almost knew. A sequence, a map, and each step I took made the pattern stronger, louder, more insistent. In the diner, I noticed the chairs weren't arranged randomly. Each one angled toward the door as if guiding someone to the exit, to the next step. But the door never led anywhere. I sat in one anyway, tracing the scratches in the table with my finger, trying to find a sign. And then I felt it again, the pressure at the back of my skull, the pull to move. I couldn't resist it. I stood and followed, as if invisible hands were guiding me along the same thread. Night fell and the forest at the edge of town became a wall of black. The path was familiar, though I'd never walked it before, at least consciously. I could feel the presence behind me now, breathing softly, shaping my steps. Every snapped twig, Every rustle in the leaves confirmed I was not alone, and yet I was moving, compelled, following the path that had claimed the others. I stumbled on a root, caught myself against a tree. That's when I saw it, the faint glow between the trunks like a lantern in the distance. I shouldn't have been able to see it from this far back. It wasn't a lantern, it was something else, something waiting. I wanted to run, but my feet moved the same way they always had. The rhythm was in me now. I was not separate, I was part of it. I kept thinking about the others, the faces in the posters, the names in my notebook. They hadn't resisted, not really. Their paths had been drawn before they arrived. And as much as I fought against the realization, I knew I would follow mine to the end, because the pattern was perfect, relentless, and I had walked it unknowingly from the moment I pulled into this town. Back in the motel, the key appeared again, on the dresser. I picked it up, heavy in my hand, cold, and I remembered the door it belonged to, room 6, the room that wasn't supposed to exist, officially empty for years. I had lingered at that door so many times, trying to avoid noticing it, trying to convince myself it wasn't important, but the pattern demanded attention. I placed the key against the lock. My breath shook. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a faint murmur I couldn't place. The posters in the hallway seemed to lean closer, the faces stretching, watching. My own reflection in the door's glass warped slightly, as if the pattern recognized me, acknowledged me. And I realized the path wasn't just following me, I was following it. The notebook trembled in my hands. Every line, every arrow, every connection now pointed inward toward me. I had been a spectator, thinking I was recording the pattern from a safe distance. But the truth was unbearable. The pattern had been recording me, and I had been moving in its rhythm the entire time, unaware, helpless, the next victim in line. I hesitated at the threshold, hand on the handle, and I thought of all the others, their empty smiles, their frozen stares in photographs that had faded over time. They had not fought. They had simply followed. And I knew now, with a certainty that made my stomach hollow, that I would follow too. Because the pattern does not ask for permission. It does not wait for consent. It simply continues. I pushed the door open. It creaked like a long-forgotten sigh. Inside, the room was empty, yet impossibly full. The air shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt, and I felt every step I had ever taken converge here. My past, my present, my choices, or the illusion of them, pressed down on me like a physical weight. The notebook fell open on the bed, pages fluttering despite no wind. Names and dates swirled, connecting in ways I had never seen before. And in the center, almost like a signature, was mine, written in the same faded ink as all the others. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the letters, and felt the pulse of the pattern beneath my skin. It was patient. It was inevitable. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing shallow, trying to make sense. But the pattern whispered, not in words, but in pressure, in rhythm, in the undeniable certainty that there was no escape. The path I had walked, the steps I had counted, the observations I thought were my own, they were all leading here, and from here outward again. Endless, cyclical, perfect. Outside the window, the motel's neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I could see the road, the diner, the gas station, the trees. All of it mapped out in my mind now. Every corner, every turn, every hesitation. And somewhere beyond that waiting was the next step, or the next victim. I realized finally that I had been both hunter and prey, observer and participant. And the pattern, relentless, indifferent, complete, would continue with or without me. I was not special. I was not chosen. I was necessary. And the revelation settled in my chest like ice, cold and immovable. I closed the notebook. The key stayed in my hand. I looked around the room, feeling the weight of every step I had taken, every face I had studied, every path I had traced. And I knew without doubt that the moment I leave this room, the pattern will resume. It will follow me. And I will follow it. There is no breaking it, only walking it. The door creaked again. Outside, the hallway stretched, dim and silent, waiting. And somewhere in the shadows between the walls, the others watched, waiting for the next step. waiting for me. I put the key in my pocket, and I stepped forward. I first noticed the bell because it woke me. Not with a chime exactly, more like a hollow groan stretching into the night, a sound that carried too far, too empty. I had parked miles away at the edge of the highway, tired from driving hours I barely remember. The motel I'd stayed at was cheap, tired, and lonely, and I remember thinking I should have kept going. But something about the sound made me stop. I didn't know why. It was the bell. Its voice seemed impossible. The church looked abandoned, walls dark with mildew and peeling paint. Its windows were jagged, some cracked, some missing entirely. Moonlight fell unevenly across the roof, silvering the edges like a warning. The first thing that struck me was that there were no hands on the clock above the bell tower. No minute, no hour, just a blank face. And yet, every night at midnight the bell rang. I don't know why I went closer that first night. Maybe curiosity, maybe some desperate pull that comes when you feel something watching just beyond your peripheral vision. The air smelled damp, sour, like wet stone and old iron. My boots crunched against gravel and broken glass. I could see the tower shadows stretching across the cemetery next to the church, long fingers over toppled gravestones. Every sound I made seemed to echo too long, too human. The bell tolled 3 times before I even reached the door. Each strike was slow, deliberate, not the usual clang you'd expect from metal hitting metal. This was hollow, almost muffled, but it reverberated through my chest. I swore I could feel it in my bones, like the sound was measuring something inside me. And then it stopped. The silence after it ended was worse than the noise, like the world had been holding its breath and just let it out all at once. I pushed the door open. It was heavy, rotting at the bottom. It creaked like a scream when it moved, and for a second I thought I heard something else, soft footsteps behind me. I spun around, but the gravel was empty, the night still. I stepped inside. The church smelled of dust, old wood, and mildew. Sunlight had faded into gray shadows that clung to the corners. I could make out the pews, some toppled, some leaning at awkward angles like they had been pushed over carefully, deliberately. The altar was gone. Just the bare stone slab remained, stained with water or maybe something older. I didn't want to touch it. I couldn't stop staring at the bell tower staircase that wound upward into darkness. Something pulled me toward it. I don't know if it was fear or fascination or the echo of that bell lingering in my chest. Every step on the stairs was loud in the silence. Each creak of old wood made me imagine the tower breathing around me. Shadows shifted as I climbed, though the moonlight from the small windows didn't move. And that's when I saw it, the bell. It was enormous, blackened by age, hanging from rusted chains that swayed slightly as though the air itself had hands. There was no clock face to tell time, no rope for a ringer, and yet it was tilting slowly back and forth, as if waiting for me to understand something. I touched it, cold metal but not icy, alive, vibrating faintly under my fingers. The vibration pulsed like a heartbeat. Then the bell rang, not a toll this time, not a groan. A single note, low and long, filling the tower, spilling down the stairs through the cemetery into the night where I had left my car. I stumbled backward, gripping the railing, listening to it fade. But the ringing didn't stop in the way I expected. It seemed to sink into my skull, slow and deliberate. I realized my ears were playing tricks. I could hear it coming from below, from above, from inside the walls. It was everywhere and nowhere. When I reached the bottom, the church seemed different. Shadows hung lower, heavier. The broken pews looked less random, more deliberate, and the air smelled different, metallic, like blood. I turned, and for a moment thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, someone standing near the doorway, watching. But when I looked, there was nothing. I started coming here every night. I couldn't explain it. I told myself I was just a fool chasing ghosts, but the bell, it was persistent. And every night it rang without hands, without a clock. I began to notice things I hadn't before. Gravestones in the cemetery shifted slightly. Some faces I thought I remembered from posters I had seen in town, missing people. Names I had forgotten seemed to be etched faintly on the stone. Not all, just enough to make me doubt what I knew. I began keeping notes. Little things. How many times the bell rang each night, the rhythm of the tolls. Sometimes it skipped beats. Sometimes it rang 4 or 5 times instead of 3. Sometimes I swear I could hear whispers in the sound, barely words, as if the bell was speaking. I tried recording it once, but the playback was always empty. Just silence and the faint hum of static. Then came the scratches. At first I thought I imagined them. Faint, slow, from inside the walls. Sometimes behind the altar, sometimes at the base of the bell tower stairs. Always when the bell had finished ringing. I started hearing them in my car too, at midnight. Soft, deliberate, like fingernails tracing letters I couldn't read. One night I stayed until the bell stopped. I was afraid of leaving, afraid of staying. When it ended, the silence was unbearable, and then I heard a voice. Not loud, not distinct, just a breathy whisper behind me. "You're late." I spun, saw nothing. My flashlight flickered, the beam dancing across peeling paint and broken windows. Nothing, only shadows. I began to dream of the bell, of the sound sinking into my chest while I slept. Sometimes it woke me midnight, though I didn't hear it outside. Sometimes I would wake covered in cold sweat, my heart pounding, thinking I had been climbing those stairs, standing under the enormous black bell. I never fell asleep easily after. I never wanted to. The townspeople noticed my visits, strange glances when I asked questions about the church. "Nobody goes there," they said, "abandoned for decades. Nothing of interest," but I knew otherwise. I felt it. Every night the bell called, and I began to notice patterns in the way people disappeared. Not all of them, but some. Those who vanished had often been near the church at some point, walking the roads late at night, driving past and glancing up at the empty tower. It was almost inevitable. I thought I could stop it. One night I brought tools. Hammers, crowbars, chains. I wanted to silence the bell, break it, destroy it. But when I reached the tower, it was impossible. The metal was unyielding. No rust gave way. No chain would snap. It swung lightly, waiting, ignoring me. And then it rang. The sound entered my head so completely I dropped everything. The bell didn't just toll, it remembered. It knew I had tried. It was patient. I started marking the time in my journal. Midnight, always midnight. Sometimes the bell rang earlier, but only by a few minutes. I realized I could predict it, count it, feel it coming in my chest like a pulse. I began to understand its rhythm. And that's when the real fear began. Not the bell, not the shadows, not even the whispers. It was the knowledge that I had become part of the pattern. The bell isn't just a bell. It's a measure, a witness, a recorder. Every night it rings, it keeps track of something I don't fully understand. And I realized that every step I took toward it, every glance upward at that tower, every sleepless night had been leading me here, into its orbit, into its call, into a path I might not escape. I've tried avoiding the church, driving past, taking other roads, ignoring the sound, but it finds me. Every night somewhere that hollow tolls inside my head, and I wake again drawn to it. The missing people, the empty gravestones, the whispers, the scratches, they're all signs, marks in a pattern I'm only beginning to see. Tonight I know I'll climb the stairs again. I know I'll stand beneath the bell, hands on cold metal, feeling the vibrations in my bones. And I'll listen. Because even if I try to resist, even if I turn away, I know it will ring. And it will remember me. The bell has no hands. It cannot measure hours, but it measures me. It measures us all. And I can feel it counting, waiting, patient as always, ringing without end. I shouldn't be here, I know that, but the next toll will come. I will hear it. And the question isn't if I will respond, it's when. I first noticed it when the floorboards groaned beneath my weight. Not the usual creaks. These were hollow, deliberate. Like whispers trapped under wood. I knelt down, pressing my fingers to the worn planks, trying to make sense of the texture, and then I saw it. A thin line etched along the grain, almost invisible at first, but there. Faint. A letter. Then another. Slowly, names emerged beneath the dust, as if the floor itself had been breathing stories into the shadows. The first name I recognized, or thought I did, I froze. I hadn't seen this person in years, couldn't have seen them, how they were gone. And yet here they were, carved beneath my feet. My stomach twisted, cold sweat prickling my spine. I wanted to pull my hand back, but curiosity was a weight anchoring me to that spot. I traced the letters with trembling fingers. Another name appeared, another. And then the pattern hit me. The list wasn't random. Every one of them had vanished from the world in strange, inexplicable ways. I stepped back, heart hammering. My foot hovered over another plank, and instinctively I lifted it. The wood moaned in protest, and beneath it, deeper carvings twisted like veins beneath the surface. More names, hundreds, maybe thousands. Dates followed some, scratched almost violently, jagged lines that made my skin crawl. But the dates some were before I even existed. I stumbled backward, pressing my palm against the wall to steady myself. How could this be? How could the floor hold memories older than the building itself? A thought whispered in my mind, faint but insistent. These weren't just names. They were predictions, records, warnings. I returned the plank slowly, my hands shaking. I couldn't bring myself to look away from the floor entirely. Something beneath it seemed alive, watching, breathing. The air grew thicker, a tangible weight pressing down, and I realized the room smelled faintly of burnt paper and iron. Nothing in this world smelled like that unless it wanted you to remember it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time here had a loose, liquid quality. I found myself crawling over the floor, following the carvings, memorizing names I shouldn't know. Each one pulled at me differently. Some sparked recognition, others fear, and a few brought a strange, horrible comfort, like I was tracing a path I was always meant to follow. And then I saw it, my own name. Half-carved, the letters uneven, almost hesitant. I pressed my finger to the wood. It felt warm, not heat from the room, but from something beneath. My heartbeat staggered. This was impossible. My name shouldn't be here. Not yet, not ever. And yet there it was, as though the floor itself had been waiting for me. I stumbled to my knees, breathing hard, staring at the plank. A loose shard broke under my fingers, and beneath it the carvings twisted in a pattern I couldn't immediately understand. Lines connecting names, arrows pointing, symbols that looked like they belonged to a language older than memory. It was a map, a pattern, a guide, and I was at its center. The air shifted suddenly. A whisper curled around my ear, unintelligible at first, then clearer. "You shouldn't be here," it said. Or maybe I said it to myself. I couldn't tell anymore. The sound wasn't outside me. It was in the wood, in the dust, in the veins of the floorboards themselves. My mind screamed to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. I spent what felt like hours tracing the lines. Some names ended with neat little crosses. Others were circled as though someone had returned to mark them again. And then I saw a pattern forming, a path, not through the floor but through reality. Every person listed here had followed this path unknowingly toward disappearance. They weren't gone by accident. They were collected, recorded, documented. And now I realized with a horror that stole my breath, the path led to me. I tried to shake the thought away, tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But the floorboards groaned again, louder this time, a slow, deliberate echo that seemed like a heartbeat. I glanced around the empty room. Walls peeling, shadows pooling in corners, and the silence felt deliberate too. Everything in this place was watching, waiting. And beneath my feet, the carvings seemed to pulse in the dim light, as if breathing life into the room itself. Something shifted. The names began to blur slightly, edges softening like the floor was erasing them, but not entirely. Some remained, more vivid than before. I leaned in closer, heart hammering. I could see the beginnings of new carvings forming beneath the old ones. Fresh scratches, fine and tentative, as if a hand that wasn't mine was at work. I shivered. Was it the building itself? A spirit? Or something far stranger, something mechanical, methodical, alive in its own dark sense? My head spun with questions I couldn't answer. Why here? Why me? Every instinct screamed to run, yet my body obeyed some invisible force keeping me crouched above the floor. My fingers brushed another name. Familiar, too familiar. Someone I'd known, someone whose disappearance had haunted me in small, unexplainable ways. And beneath that name, a symbol I recognized but couldn't place. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a record. It was a story. My story. The whisper returned, curling around my skull. "Follow the lines." My blood ran cold. The floor wasn't just holding names, it was holding me. And the lines were instructions. Instructions for survival or perhaps a trap. I couldn't tell, but every fiber of my being screamed that someone or something wanted me to follow them. And every instinct told me I had no choice. I spent the next hours, or maybe it was a day, mapping the lines, following the connections. Each name linked to another, some crossed out, some circled, some trailing off into nothingness. And the pattern emerged, a web, intricate, unyielding, inescapable. Every disappearance, every vanishing, every missing person had followed this web before me. Every step had been recorded, every misstep predicted. And now I realized with a sick certainty I was the next. I stumbled back, dizzy, hand pressed to my chest. The air had thickened, a suffocating fog of dust and memory. The room seemed to tilt, the walls bending inward. Shadows stretched across the floor, stretching over the names, pulling them toward me. And then I saw it, a new carving freshly etched beneath the wood where my name had already been. A date. Tonight. I could barely breathe. The room felt alive now, throbbing with anticipation. My mind screamed to run, but my legs refused. The floorboards seemed to hum beneath me, resonating with some ancient, dreadful rhythm. And then I noticed the edges of the room. Tiny splinters of wood were lifting, curling upward as though the floor was breathing. Something beneath it stirred, watching, waiting. I sank to the floor, chest heaving, tracing the path again. One name led to another, spiraling inward until it ended beneath me. The realization hit like a fist. The floor wasn't just a record. It was a guide, and I was at its heart. Every previous victim had been drawn here, step by step, by the same invisible hand. Every disappearance had been orchestrated, and now the hand was guiding me. A sudden calm fell over me, deceptive and unnatural. I pressed my palm to the carved lines, feeling the grooves beneath my skin, feeling the warmth of names that should not have existed. And in that moment, a terrible understanding settled over me. I wasn't discovering this place. It had been waiting for me. I had always been part of the pattern, even before I knew it, even before I remembered. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear myself away from the floor entirely, but I couldn't. My fingers followed the path once more, tracing names, following the lines, and a small, sick part of me realized something perverse. Knowledge here was power. Understanding the pattern meant survival. Maybe, perhaps. But even as I convinced myself of that, a fresh shiver crawled down my spine. Somewhere in the shadows, something was moving, observing, patient, and it didn't want me to leave. I pulled back, finally, just enough to see the room in its entirety. The names beneath the floor were no longer static. They twisted slightly, shifting, forming new patterns, new paths. And then I saw it, the beginning of another line, spiraling outward, leading beyond the room, beyond the walls. It was calling me, and I knew, in a way that left no room for doubt, that tonight I would follow it. Because the floor beneath me wasn't just a record of the past. It was a living map of the missing, and it had just added my name to its story. The carvings pulsed faintly in the dim light. I pressed my hand to the first name I recognized, tracing it one last time before letting the shadows swallow me. Step by step, I followed the path, and the whisper returned, almost a caress now. Every name leads somewhere. Every path returns. And beneath me the floor waited, patient, eternal. I couldn't stop staring at it. My name, etched in jagged lines across the wood beneath the dim glow of a single bulb swinging in the corner. The letters weren't perfect, too shaky, too uneven, but unmistakably mine. I pressed my palm to the floor, tracing them, and the wood felt warmer than it should, almost pulsing beneath my skin. My chest tight. How could it be here? How could it exist before anything had happened? The room seemed to inhale around me, slow and deliberate. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching toward me like dark fingers. I wanted to step back to leave, but my feet were glued. It was as if the floor itself had claimed me. My fingers traced the carvings again, and I noticed something I hadn't before. A series of small notches next to the letters, almost like tally marks counting down. 1, 2, 3. And then a small, jagged line that looked almost like a clock hand pointing toward midnight. I swallowed hard. Midnight. I'd heard stories, whispers from people who had vanished without a trace. They always mentioned the bell, the church, the clock. But now, looking at my name carved into this floor, I realized something far worse. It wasn't just about disappearing. It was about being expected, about being next in line. I leaned back, my hands pressed to my temples. The air smelled faintly of old smoke and iron, familiar and wrong all at once. The shadows seemed to twitch. I could feel them moving along the edges of my vision. I blinked and the notches had changed. There were more. They were closer to midnight now. I hadn't looked away long enough to make sense of it, yet here they were, counting me down. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. I felt it in my chest, a hollow vibration as though the room was swallowing my voice before it even formed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Step by step, the pattern of the floor beneath me became undeniable. Every name I had seen before, every disappearance I had traced had ended here, beneath my hands. And now I was part of it. I tried to lift myself, but the floor seemed to pulse with resistance. Not physically, but psychologically, a weight pressing against my spine, locking me in place. I knelt there, tracing the edges of my letters, and a whisper curled around me. "You've been next all along." The voice wasn't outside me. It came from the wood, from the carvings, from the dark spaces between the lines. It was intimate enough to make me flinch. The shadows shifted again, coalescing into shapes I couldn't name. Faces maybe, glimpses of people I recognized from the carved names. Their features were faint like smoke, but familiar enough to make my stomach twist. And each one seemed to point at me, accuse me, call me forward. My chest tightened. I realized with a sick certainty this wasn't random. I hadn't stumbled into this by accident. I had always been on the list, always been meant to follow the pattern. The notches beside my name counted up now. 1, 2, 3, each tick echoing in the silence. I felt my pulse in my temples and my fingers pressed to the floor. The room was no longer silent. It hummed, low and resonant, like a drumbeat syncing with my heartbeat. And then the temperature dropped. A chill that crept under my skin, winding through my chest, my shoulders, my arms. The shadows stretched further, darker now, moving toward me in silent waves. I tried to stand. My legs shook violently, knees buckling beneath me. The floor groaned under the shift of weight. And then I saw it, a crack forming along the center of the room, thin at first, splitting the wood like a vein. Through it something glimmered faintly, almost like wet metal, almost alive. My stomach clenched. The names around mine trembled, edges softening, twisting, shifting. They were no longer static. They were moving, pulling me toward the crack. I stumbled back, fingers scraping across another name, and the carvings changed again. One name vanished entirely. Another twisted into something unrecognizable, letters stretching, bending, bleeding into the wood. My hands recoiled, heart hammering. The floor was alive, reacting to me, predicting me, guiding me. Every previous victim had followed its pull, and now it was my turn. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to ground myself, breathe, count. But the whispers were louder now, forming words I didn't want to understand. "You are ready. Follow. Do not resist." They weren't threats. They were instructions, commands, invitations. And beneath it all, an unspoken certainty. If I resisted, it would come anyway. Midnight would find me whether I moved or not. I sank to the floor, trembling, tracing the names that surrounded mine. Each one a story, a life, a disappearance. And beneath the carvings, I could feel the floor pulsing again, warmer this time, vibrating with anticipation. The cracks widened slightly, glimmering with that faint metallic sheen. I wanted to look away, but the pull was magnetic. My name was central now, surrounded by every other name I had memorized, every pattern I had traced in my mind. I was at the heart of it. Whisper returned closer, almost brushing my ear. "Step forward." I froze. A part of me wanted to obey, to crawl toward the crack, toward whatever waited beneath. Another part screamed to run, to tear myself from the floor, to smash the carvings and erase myself from the pattern entirely. But instinct betrayed me. My hands moved, tracing the path from my name to the next, a thin line stretching toward the darkness. And as I followed it, the shadows coiled around my legs, tugging gently, insistently. A memory surfaced, A fleeting flash of someone else I had known, lost, vanished. They had followed this pattern too. I had watched their disappearance unfold in vague news reports, half-forgotten stories. And now I understood they hadn't been taken randomly. They had been following the path, and now so was I. The cracks widened further, the metallic gleam now unmistakably real. Beneath it, a dark depth, infinite and consuming. The air smelled of iron, old wood, and something sweeter like decay waiting to bloom. I could feel my pulse in my ears, each beat echoing like the tolling of a bell I hadn't seen. Midnight was approaching. I could feel it in the notches, the trembling floor, the pulsing wood beneath my hands. I traced the last line, following it to the center of the widening crack. And then I saw it, a faint shimmer of something waiting. Shapes, maybe forms, maybe nothing I could name. The whispers crescendoed into a low hum, vibrating through my bones. And I realized with a chilling clarity that this was what the names had always been leading to. This was the destination, the end of the path, and I was here. My hands hovered over the edge, fingers trembling. A pull, magnetic and irresistible, tugged at me. My name glowed faintly beneath my palm, the letters warm, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Step forward, it seemed to say. Or perhaps it was the floor itself, guiding me, coaxing me, claiming me. I could resist, yes, but the pattern had waited too long and it would not be denied. I took a breath. Step by step, I moved forward, following the path laid beneath my hands. Each name, each notch, each carved line seemed to watch me, encouraging me, warning me. The shadows pressed closer, closer than they had ever been, wrapping around the room, the walls, the floor. I could hear the hum growing, the pulse beneath the wood accelerating, counting down, counting up, anticipating my move. And then the last moment before the edge, I paused, my name beneath my fingers, the shadows breathing around me, the hum thrumming in my chest. Midnight was seconds away. I could feel it, a presence, a weight, a consciousness older than the building itself. And I realized with a sick, beautiful clarity this was not an end. This was a beginning. The floor beneath me, the names, the patterns, they weren't finished. Not yet, and I was now part of them. The shadows drew back slightly, giving me a glimpse into the darkness below. The hum slowed, settled, and in that silence a whisper curled around me, warm, intimate, inevitable. You are next and always will be. I pressed my hand to the carved letters one last time, tracing them carefully, memorizing them, because I knew I would have to follow them again. Tonight, tomorrow, always. The floor had claimed me. My name glowed faintly in the dim light. I drew in a shaky breath and then I stepped forward. And beneath me the floor waited, patient, eternal.